Alright, hello, welcome everyone. We're gonna be learning how to... I'm actually gonna give HOI4 a go. You know, it's a game that has been on my Twitch library, but, you know, I think when I tried it initially, you know, I gave it a go. It seemed a little bit too complicated. I didn't quite understand how to play it, but fortunately we've got Izlude here. He's a long-time viewer. He's gonna actually end up teaching me how to play HOI4. It's kind of one of the games I've kind of seen people play on YouTube, and some of the stuff is pretty awesome. I just wish I could get my head around it. Maybe that might be something that would end up happening from today. So gonna spend the next 2 to 3 hours trying to learn the game. And then we'll see how we go. All right, Izlude, how have you been, man?
It's a nice evening.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's late afternoon here, where I am. Late Sunday afternoon, and yeah, looking forward to getting started. What should I select first? Single or multiplayer?
It's single player.
All right.
It's the best way to learn, and you can play any country for the most part.
Yep.
We're gonna try to pick a country that has more of a unique focus tree, but not too debilitating. So just get the new game.
Fair enough. Yep.
Yep. So
1936 or start or something.
this is an interesting thing here. This is a good choice, and here's the 1936 is where you'll start almost every single game, like 99% of the time. And it allows you, even in multiplayer, to build up and kind of choose and make craft your build in terms of what options you're going to choose, how you're going to build your army, your navy, your air force, etc.
Yep.
Compared to 1939, because 1939, if you look at that date, August 14th, that basically tosses you straight into World War II start.
Yep.
And one of the advantages of that is if you select 1939, is it actually throws you right, if you pick Germany, for instance, like you're ready to invade Poland, and you can actually use that 1939 start as a really good start to play around with combat and get better and better at land war.
Yep.
So you can load it up, go through, load it up, go through, just rinse and repeat until you get really comfortable with combat. But for now, let's do 1936.
Sure. I mean, it's better for me to actually learn every aspect of the game, I guess, from 36 onwards, as opposed to getting thrown into the thick of it. Alright, so what nation should I choose?
So I don't know, because you're using the absolute vanilla of the game.
Yep.
Let's actually just pick Germany for now.
Okay. That works.
And the reason why is because if there's any country in this game that is in the driver's seat in this timeline, it's Germany.
Yeah.
The options that you have, the buildup that you have, Germany is a real powerhouse of the game.
Yeah, I can imagine just like in the real war.
Right.
Yeah. Alright.
Yeah, just hit Germany, hit select country, and we're off.
Difficulty?
Just normal.
Okay, recruit.
Yep.
Yep.
And the historical focuses are fine.
Alright. So...
Because we're probably not even going to get into World War II, we're just going to go over things.
Yep.
Okay. So... starts off, like you see all, the upper bar there, all these options. Don't worry about those yet.
Yep.
What you want to look at is straight up, look at the, click on the flag icon in the upper left.
Yep.
So, here's Mr. H, bad guy supreme. But immediately we have select national focus, you see national spirits, you see axis. All this is your country information, including faction. And his faction, of course, is the Axis. England is the faction owner of the Allies. But when you click on national focus...
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
but yeah, so in the national focus tree, you can already see, you can click on things that are on the top, and because everything looks top down in terms of the focus tree, focuses are almost always 70 days. There are a few examples where they're 35 or 21 days, or sometimes 14 days, but by and large, focuses are 70 days. This lets you do 5.2 focus trees a year, or sorry, 5.4 focuses a year. And because of that, you can kind of plan out like how long will, if I need to get to this, how long is it going to take me? Is it going to take me like 70 days, 140 days, 210 days? So you can kind of like plan out like, what you want out of something. And a really good example of that is, so if you're looking at the 4-year plan there, you look at 4-year plan, autarky, Herman going work, KDF wagon, and then an extra research slot. And the more research you have, the more stuff you're going to be able to produce.
Yeah.
The more bonuses you're going to acquire, etc. So research slots are usually at the top of everyone's gotta have list.
Yep.
And some focus trees, they bury them really, really deep, or they put requirements behind them, which are kind of annoying sometimes. But because Germany is in kind of the driver's seat of all this, they usually make it very, very easy for driver's seat nations to play the game, essentially, or get to where they need to go.
Yep.
So you can see if you're already hovering over things, you can see the massive amount of bonuses you're getting out of this. Like,
Yeah, this build
billions.
looks pretty good.
Yeah, Germany is powerful.
So many factories, and then the extra research slot. Is there any reason not to go autarky unless you're trying a different build or something?
One example of something you could do instead is if you look farther to the right past Rhineland, you see naval armament.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to scroll a bit.
Yep.
It's way over there. So notice naval rearmament is 35 days.
Yep.
And then naval effort is another 35 days.
So that's two and one kind of thing.
Yeah, it's 2 focuses, etc. But yeah, and then there's expand the dockyard facilities. So for just 70 days, you'd be able to pick up 5 dockyards, which would certainly help jumpstart your naval building.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, if you want to spend another 70 days, you could pick up another 4. 9 dockyards in just 140 days is a lot.
So when they say you have the dockyards, do they just come out of nowhere, or do you have to actually build them?
Oh no, it makes them. If you click on one, so I click on like naval effort, for instance.
Adds to naval dockyard, right? So you just get it straight off the bat. You don't need to do anything.
It makes the building slots and then it populates them.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, again, like in this, if you look at it, you also get the naval effort. You also get that 100% research for both destroyers and cruisers.
Yep.
I mean, 35-day focus for all that, that's a lot. So if you're going to try to do something like contest the high seas and you want to start jump-starting that naval production, this is an option for you. Germany, if you hover up at the very top, you'll see a gauge there that's green. It's the fuel gauge. If you look to the left of it, just hover over the factories and it'll tell you how many factories you have.
Factories.
It says 69.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I gotcha.
So you can see that you have 28 military factories, you've got 10 naval dockyards, and then you have 31 civilian
Jesus,
factories.
so if you being able to add 5 on top of that's like 50% extra. Oh, that's nuts.
See what I mean? Like if you have a build that you're going to go for, and you're going to try to like contest the high seas against like Britain or France or whatever, because historically Germany did not have a surface navy of note. They had to specialize into subs because that was the most effective thing they could do, because they didn't have the surface navy they planned on.
No. I mean, so, I read like, I mean, I watched a few dockers which said that, I mean, their ideal war plan would have had them starting war from like the mid 1940s rather than when it actually happened.
Yeah, it was supposed to happen like 6 to 7 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had the whole plan of what they were going to do, and when they invaded Poland, they actually didn't think that the Allies would declare war. Like they actually didn't, because like remember they walked into Austria and everyone was okay with that, and then they took Czechoslovakia and everyone was okay with that, and then when they went for Poland, that's when the Allies finally put their foot down, and they were like, wait, what? They actually didn't think that it would start a war.
Yeah, exactly. All right,
But
so
if you
yeah,
look further down on that naval tree, um, actually it might not be in yours.
yeah, like it's. I mean, this is vanilla. I mean, I haven't bought any DLC because I mean, I didn't really play this game until now, so
Right. Um,
yeah. But I think once I
yeah,
get into it, maybe I might get into the DLCs or so.
you don't have it. I think what the DLC that they add to it, which for Germany was Death or Dishonor. There's an expansion off of Plan Z, and it's called Crossing the Atlantic. And what it does is it takes 5 of Germany's core areas, and what it does is it adds building slots and then adds naval dockyards to them. So you end up getting like
Hmm.
10 naval dockyards in one focus. So again, like that
Jesus.
whole like naval buildup, and if you take a look at like I actually can't really easily because of Intel and everything, but if you take a look at like England, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
you can see a definitive difference if you just right click on the English countryside and then go to the Intel ledger. You can see what England has for the most
Intel,
part.
Intel, 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 Intel.
Yeah, just right click on England.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, no, okay. Took me a while to work out what to do there, but yeah.
Click on Intel ledger. It's a little tab there underneath.
Where's Intel
And
Ledger?
this gives that you're seeing it. You're seeing the intelligence. So
Okay,
the,
yep.
the problem is you don't have a high intel level on your enemies because you don't have a spy in there, whatnot, and so you only get variations of what they might have. For instance, you don't really know how many ground troops they have. 12 to 61. You could probably say it's probably around 35 to 40. But
Yep.
then the military factory is 13 to 15. It's probably 14. Dockyards 17 to 21, probably 19. Civilian factories 27 to 33, probably 30. But it gives you that kind of an idea of what your
Hmm.
enemies have, and you can later on you can send in, especially with DLCs, you can make spies, send them in, get information. But this right here just gives you a good idea of what people around you have,
Yep.
so you know what you're getting into.
Yep.
But you can already see like the differences between like England and Germany, as Germany's pretty stacked in terms of military factories and everything else. Like England had the biggest fleet in after World War One. Like
Yep.
they didn't call it the British Empire for nothing.
No.
Uh, huge fleet, and that because of that they have lots of dockyards compared to Germany. You can fix that, but that's the whole decision making of, do I build dockyards? Do I build civilian factories? Do I build mills? You're always going to be building something. So let's talk about buildings.
Yep.
Buildings work this way. Civilian factories are essentially a good example of what an economy is.
Mm-hmm.
Military factories, they build basically land and air. They build both. You assign them how you want. You want guns, you want support equipment, you want artillery, you want tanks, you want trucks, planes. Like, that's what military factories are for. Dockyards only build ships or convoys. That's a special unit. Convoys are how supplies get delivered. They're also how naval invasions are done.
Yep.
So if you look, it'll always show you how many convoys you have. At the very top, to the right of that green bar, you have 199 convoys.
What do I
So
see that?
whenever it's the very top, it's
100.
right next to the green 199.
Oh, right here. Gotcha.
Yep. They always try to put it right in front of you so that you're very cognizant of how many you have, because if you're getting convoy weighted by subs and you're losing convoys, they don't want to hide that from you, and all of a sudden, hey, by the way, you're out of convoys. So like, oh, I didn't even notice. They try to keep that in front of your face.
Yeah.
Other countries like England and whatnot usually have like upwards of 700 to 800 convoys. But keep in mind that's for supply. That's for supply. That's for trading resources. Lend lease, when someone like sends you equipment, it uses up some convoys temporarily. You'll get them back after you get everything. They don't get destroyed.
Yep.
But they are built by dockyards. But for the most part, you'll probably focus on building a surface navy. I personally feel like you make enough ships, convoys, to feel safe with your number of convoys, but you can also capture convoys from capturing countries. So Germany doesn't need to worry too much, because Germany's all about capturing countries.
Yep.
So, simple civilian factories, they're going to build things. They're going to be essentially your wealth.
Yep.
They will build either military factories, dockyards, or some kind of infrastructure. Either infrastructure, ports, anti-air, etc. You see it right there. This is your build screen. Now, with this build screen for construction, you can see that there's consumer goods. And this is a factor because your consumer goods are set by a couple of different factors. Both your war footing, which is your mobilization. Right now, Germany's sitting on partial mobilization. And the farther down you go in mobilization, the less consumer goods are used for essentially making toasters, refrigerators, consumer goods. And more of it's used for making military factories instead.
Yep.
Yep, you see it right there. And what you preferably want to get to is war economy as soon as possible. Total mobilization looks good on paper, but you also take a recruitable population hit as a penalty. So sometimes you can balance it out by going into your manpower and going into farther levels of manpower, but one day you're just going to have to move back up to war economy anyway. So war economy is a pretty stable, it is the most stable of all of those for doing your country. Total mobilization is really kind of one of those I'll do it if I need it type things. But usually you don't need it. And there's some countries that have it in their focus trees, like Japan has it in one of their DLCs where it actually sets the total war, total mobilization for them. But they also have a focus that gives them 2.5% recruitable pop as a balance out to it. So they still lose 0.5% recruitable population.
But it's
So
less
again,
than what it otherwise would be.
Right, it's not as punishing.
No.
But Japan's in a sticky situation because it doesn't have exactly the greatest economy. So total mobilization helps that.
So how do consumer factories help?
Consumer factories are what you build. They're what you build to build anything.
Yep.
So the more consumer factories that you build, the more you're going to build. So early games, people will build a lot of consumer civilian factories. Sorry, so I should say civilian factories. They'll build a lot of civilian factories because the more civilian factories you have, the more you'll be able to make more of them, and then more of them, and more. But you're going to hit that critical, point where you're going to be like, I've got enough civilian factories, and I should be making my mills, my docks, etc.
So what usually is the right balance here?
The right balance, it totally depends on countries, and it depends on feel. It's one of those things, again, like test build, because the more you test, the more you fail, the more you learn, the more you figure out. You tune in that balance, essentially.
Yep.
I personally find with big countries like Germany, England, I'm not going to use I don't play Soviet Union hardly at all, so I'm not going to use that. But good example, Germany and England, both of them are good examples of this, is once you get to the point where you're at 3 lines, well, 3 full lines with Germany, maybe even pushing a 4th line. By line, I mean, if you click on civilian factory, for instance, look around at Germany, and you'll see like you'll see all these plus, plus 70%, 60%,
Yep.
80%. What these show you is you're going to be getting a bonus to construction in high infrastructure areas, which makes sense. You're building a civilian factory out in like Alice Springs, Australia. It's going to take a little bit longer than like Sydney, right?
Yeah.
So, perfect example. Higher infrastructure areas make it easier to build factories. So a good thing with civilian factories to do is, since they have such a high cost compared to like military factories, is to always try to build your civilian factories in your high infrastructure areas.
So in this
And
case, for instance, Brandenburg with the 80%, that would be a good place to build it?
right, Brandenburg, Rhineland, Westfalen, Württemberg.
So basically anything with an 80%.
Yeah, and you can hold shift while you're doing this, and it will put down the limit of what can go there.
Put another one in Frankfurt, Württemberg. Even 70s are alright, yeah?
Yeah, no, 70 is fine.
Okay.
Anything 50 or up is what people recommend, but since like Germany has 80,
They've got
why
80s
not?
everywhere, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So
But
how much do civilian factories actually improve the improve like construction speed?
So it's not construction speed. What's going to happen is you see up in the top of this construction, you see that factory count has a orange factory and it says 31.
31? Oh yeah.
So it uses the 31, and then it uses consumer goods, because what happens is, because of your current mobilization law, as well as your total factory count,
Yep.
it will take a certain number of those civilian factories away from that total and leave you with what you have. And currently you have 15 plus 7, so you're looking at 22 when everything is all said and done. And the thing is, the more civilian factories you build, the more that number goes up, and the more civilian factories you're going to eventually have for these lines. And so what I meant by lines is, right now you're at 17 and 7. Later on, once you get enough civilian factories, you're going to be 15 and 7. So you're going to be having 15, 15, 15, and then maybe more after that. And so the more civilian factories you build, the easier it is to build even more. And
Military
that's
factories
why.
as well eventually, yeah.
Exactly. So you kickstart your economy. You kickstart your economy so that later on, when you start pumping out military factories, you're going to start doing it really, really, really fast. And here's something to take a look at. Let's go over and click on the flag again, and you'll see in laws and government, you'll see 2 crossed rifles, and it'll be called partial mobilization.
Yeah.
So notice it says military factory construction speed plus 10%.
Yep.
You don't get a bonus for building civilian factories.
Nope.
But you do get a bonus at partial mobilization for building military factories. And even though you're building civilian factories right now, don't immediately go, ooh, I get military factories, let's build a bunch of mills, because eventually you're going to not have enough civilian factories to
support
build more
it.
civs.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But the thing is, if you click on partial mobilization like you have, and you look at war economy, you have a 20% military construction speed.
Yeah.
But then you combine that with even more, because if you click to the right of the partial mobilization on add political advisor.
Add political advisor. Sorry, whereabouts again?
The little plus, it looks like a little
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
like a Capitol building, House of Parliament. Yeah. So these are political advisors that you can buy with what's called political power. And every day that you play the game, as Germany, you're going to get about 1.6, 1.7 political power.
Yep.
And as you play, you're going to be buying advisors and design companies. And for advisors, look at the war industrialist, that's an extra 10%. And so you start adding all these bonuses, and the more civs that you build earlier, once you get all these and you start switching over to building mills, you're going to all of a sudden just start snapping out military factories. And while building mills early can really help with long-term equipment gain, because the sooner you build a military factory, the sooner you start building equipment.
Yeah.
That is completely valid logic, but at the same time, especially for big countries like Germany, England, etc., going straight into civs makes more sense, because long term, when you finally flip over, let's say in like 1938 or so, and you start going from civs to mills, all of a sudden you're building a lot of mills really, really, really fast. So it's kind of that build up phase where you're building your economy to build up later.
So what I'm guessing
Right.
is at the beginning you might end up going, say, Mr. Shark tier, and then also Mr. Funk, and then that would get your factories up really quickly, even faster, after building
Right.
the what's it called, the civs first.
Right. So, yeah, yeah. Shakhtar, you have to complete the 4-year plan, which is that plan in the far upper left-hand corner with
So,
all the focus
yeah.
trees.
So I guess research-wise, we'll get that done first. Or
So,
focus, I mean, 4-year plan. So I think that's the most
but,
important one.
but here's the thing, though. Like, here's one of those. Let's think about something for a moment.
Yep.
Because when you look at the 4-year plan, notice you also get industrial research bonuses. So when you're thinking, and this is the whole strategy thing of like trying to make a build look really good or exceptionally good.
Yep.
So let's go talk about research real quick before going back to that,
Sure.
because we're on this tangent of that guy and that plan. So go ahead and click on the beaker for research.
Yep. On it now.
Okay, and this is all the stuff you can make. They've organized it fairly well: green, blue, red, and then orange. Go to the far right orange industry,
Yep.
and notice like that bonus to industry, the 2 times bonus for industry, can be anything in this tree. Now,
Mm.
the thing is, since we're in 1936, you'd be getting a 2 times industry bonus for stuff that you can do right now, no problem. Who cares, right?
Yep.
So what you can do with your research slots is you can start researching 1936 basic machine tools in the upper left, and you could also start to research the construction. That's you can see right there in the middle. And while you do something, and again, this is a build idea, is you could be working on your dockyards or something else. And even though you're putting off doing that research slot, because you are putting that off a little bit, you can be thinking long term with those times 100 research bonuses. Will you apply them to something like 1939 technology?
Right.
And you wouldn't have to research it immediately. What you could do.
What you can also do is you can go electronic engineering, because that boosts research speed, and then you wait until you pop the national focus for your plan, and then both will be done at the same time, which will let you get the construction and the basic machine tools in the same amount of time that it would have from beforehand anyway.
Well, what you can do is, when you're doing this, is you can actually kind of put off. I mean, again, this is the whole play around with build type things. You can actually put this off until mid 36,
Yep.
and you could actually research time ahead in 1937, like 1937 concentrated industry and 1937 construction. And then when you get those bonuses by doing 4-year plan, because all you have to do is start researching those. And as long as you're researching those, the bonus will be applied to the next thing that you click on. So when you finish those, you'll have the bonus all across the board, but all you have to do is click on concentrated industry. It applies the bonus to it. Then you click on construction, it applies the second bonus to it.
Yep.
Then it removes that bonus from everything else, and then you can research something like 1937 machine tools. But that bonus will always be there, and you don't have to research it immediately. You could wait until 1938, then start researching it, and then that's when you start switching over to something like doing mills instead of civilian factories. And so as you produce more mills, you get that bonus production, kind of sliding in,
Yep.
and you can see how it can be very, very powerful. It's like, again, like how you use your bonuses can be a very big factor in this game.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's about planning. Um, while we're here, a lot of this kind of explains itself for the most part in terms of research. Green stuff is land army stuff. Blue is naval, red is air and engineering, and
Research is orange.
yeah, it's industry, and it's
Yep.
kind of a two-part thing. It's both production, construction, and fuel. So engineering, this is where you get a lot of bonuses, and these bonuses are for research. So 1936 electronic
I guess
gives you
this would be,
plus 3%.
you'd go with that first or something. Increase
Almost
the research
everyone
speed.
does that. Yeah, almost everyone does that straight out, and then they usually do mechanical computing right after that.
Yep.
So this kind of holds down a research slot for a year, but you end up getting a total of +7 research speed, and that +7 is on every single research slot.
Exactly.
And then in 38, you get the next one, which gives you a 5%. And then there's also you'll definitely want to pick up radio at some point. You don't have to do it too early, but depending on your country, you also want to pick up radar, because radar will help against both finding ships out at sea when you build radar towers and whatnot, but most importantly with your air war, because it will really help you engage other airplanes in the air.
Yep.
So simple thing. We'll start with far left infantry. You have the infantry guns, and then you have bonuses that apply to your infantry. So you already start with 1936 guns.
Mm-hmm.
You start with, and this is as Germany, you start with your mobile infantry, aka trucks, and then you start out with your armored cars. I would not worry about armored cars; they're not that good.
Yep.
They were put in the game, and Paradox never really did anything with them. I would not create them. I wouldn't build them.
Yep.
But
Unlike
Germany
in
also
Code 2.
has, yeah, they also have mountain infantry. Mountain infantry is special forces.
Yep.
So what's really good about special forces is that they're custom made for a specific task. Marines do naval invasions, and they do them very, very well, because when you send troops to go storm Normandy Beach, they need to be trained on how to do it. Otherwise, you get a penalty.
Oh, the
So
special forces. I didn't see this earlier. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
yeah, so you don't have the
No, I had to scroll down.
That's a DLC thing then. But yeah, the
You got mounted infantry,
special-
paratroopers, marines, and also special forces as well.
well, special forces enhances those three above it.
Oh, okay.
So whatever you pick, whether it be, and you can pick all of them actually, but the thing is, you have what's called a special forces cap, and that cap is dependent on how many divisions you have in the field.
Yep.
So the bigger your armies get, the more special forces you can make.
Yep.
And I personally find that the best are the Marines and the Mountaineers. Parachutists or Fallschirmjägers for Germany, they're good, but they're really hard to use.
Yeah.
They really are. They need to make them a little bit easier to use. But Marines are always integral for either doing a naval invasion or crossing rivers, because they also get bonuses for crossing rivers.
Yeah.
But
as you'd imagine.
right, as you'd imagine. But also the Mountaineers, I mean, they're good on both mountains and hills. So Mountaineers are actually very powerful in the game.
So how would you
take Italy
recognize
for-
hills or something?
Go back to the hit escape.
Oh, okay. Yep. Would you have to see it on the 3D map before you work out whether the hills or not?
Hit F5.
Ah! Alright. I didn't need to hold F5.
Oh, it didn't give you a map. What did it pop up? Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah. So this gives you kind of a color code of what things are.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little confusing, because hills are actually the yellow.
Yeah,
So you
in
can
here it's
see
yellow.
yeah, you can see that the mountains are gray, hills are yellow, brown is plains, green is forest. But you can see that there's actually a lot of mountains and hills in the game when you start looking at it. Not so much in like northern Europe, but like southern Europe, like say Italy, Yugoslavia, Romania. Like that's where you start encountering a lot of hills and mountains.
Yep.
So mountaineers can actually be very, very useful if you end up doing combat in those areas. And this is based on like a German perspective. If you keep looking at like that kind of map terrain, take a look at China. China is full of mountains and hills, and it's not very fun to like slog through. So, like Japan usually uses a lot of Marines, but my builds, I usually have like 2 or 3 mountaineers because they will chew through mountains and hills so much better than normal infantry that they're able to push better than like a Marine unit would.
Yep.
So Asia, and even going into like the British Raj and down further and whatnot, those mountaineers are able to be very, very effective. So it's one of those things where choose the special forces you want for the reasons that you need,
Yep.
and you can always do a combination of them. Again, like my England builds, my Japan builds, I usually have a couple mountaineers, and then I go into Marines because Marines are good for the naval invasions, and they're really good for crossing rivers. And there's no
God,
shortage of rivers in the game.
UK. The map looks pretty messy when it comes to the F5.
Oh yeah, no,
Lots,
like
lots of random stuff everywhere.
it's pretty varied terrain, yeah.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah, going back to
yep. Go on. Sorry.
going back to equipment, or I should say research.
Research.
You've got your special forces, and then if you look at there's a picture of a man with a plus next to it. This is support companies, and support companies are very, very good at enhancing divisions, but you don't want to go full hog on like your normal infantry guys.
Mhm.
So going from the top, you've got engineer, then you have recon, military police. Wouldn't worry about military police. Um, Maintenance companies, field hospitals. Wouldn't really recommend field hospitals. They use a lot of support equipment. You don't get a lot out of them.
Yep.
You have logistics companies and you have signal companies. Now, if you made an infantry division, like this was your standard infantry division, and you went, I want engineers, recon, logistics, and signal, that would be really stacky. And the reason why is because they'd use up a lot of support equipment in
Yep.
that division. And they both need to have it, and every time they go and do something with it, they lose it. And so you'd have to produce a immense amount of support equipment.
Gotcha.
What you usually want to do, and Germany is a good example of this, is with Germany you make a lot of leg army divisions. But what you do is you push with tanks. The leg army kind of fills in, and then you
Leg
push with
army.
tanks.
Sorry.
Leg army meaning infantry.
Oh, okay. Oh, leg army. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you push with tanks. The infantry kind of fill in. Push with tanks again. They fill in, and that way you try not to use them on the offensive as much, because tanks will use up a lot less manpower.
Yep.
Because whenever you go in combat, someone's gonna die,
Yep.
both your enemy and you. But infantry, you can grind a lot of manpower, especially in really bad terrain. Like if you click on a mountain tile, like for example, the Alps, or like Switzerland is a good example. If you click on one of those mountain tiles and hover over it, it says mountain unit effects. Attack 40%, division attrition plus 40%, and that means you're going to be chewing through a lot of both equipment and manpower.
Yep.
It's just not very effective to fight in mountains. Which again, that means mountaineers are actually very good for that because they use up less manpower when they're on the attack, and they have bonuses to counteract the mountain tile penalties. Mountains are horrible. Never fight with tanks if you can try to avoid it. in mountains. It's not very fun. You'll use a lot of tanks really, really fast.
And then, because your attrition just wrecks you eventually.
Eventually, it wrecks you. Yeah, you'll suddenly realize, oh shoot, I'm missing 600 tanks.
What happened? They just broke down on the mountain or something?
Yeah, they break down, etc. And desert isn't as bad, but it's still bad. We just try not to fight.
Oh,
with
now you
tanks on
mentioned
mountains.
desert. I haven't seen the specs for that.
Oh, just
20%.
yeah,
Oh,
it's 20%.
chance it gets like 100%.
Yeah, deserts and jungles are both really bad for sickness. Jungles, however, if you look at Indonesia, they're kind of the worst thing ever in a lot of ways, like division attrition, chance to get sick, enemy air support. I mean, it's kind of bad fighting in jungles. It's
Yeah,
flat out real. I don't love fighting in Indonesia most of the time. It's not great, but
yeah. Something the Australians had to do back in the war.
oh yeah, no, in my Australia builds and multiplayer, I usually make enough that I just tell the USA player, it's like, hey, how about you garrison Australia for me, and I'll forward deploy into Indonesia, and they're like, yeah, sure, great, because it means I'm controlling my troops forward, and he just has garrison troops on Australia, and we don't have to worry about it unless someone actually naval invades Australia.
Yep,
And if I'm doing my job, I'm preventing them from even getting there. So
exactly.
it makes it more fun though, that way. But yeah, let's go back to, again, this is like, for division builds for like your standard infantry. If you're a big country like Germany, for example, you want to build a lot of support equipment, and you definitely want to use engineers. After that, recon, and there's something that's not shown here, and it's artillery and support artillery. Maybe you want to use support artillery too. I would recommend it as Germany.
Where would I
But
find support artillery? Is it just under?
so if you look at artillery itself,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it.
that's your artillery.
Into artillery, anti-air. Oh, does the artillery just come with the infantry units when you build it?
When you put it together a division template, you can put it in there or
Yep.
remove it. Yes.
Okay.
But for like a big country like Germany, I would recommend using artillery as a support company, because you're going to have a high production compared to a lot of other countries. When you have high production, usually you want to make higher quality stuff.
Yep.
If you're like a low production, and a good example of that, a low production country would actually be something like China.
Yep.
China in 1936, not exactly high production. Therefore, they want to make guns, but they probably want to leave artillery for later.
Yep.
Later on, when their production increases, they can definitely do something like support artillery. But for something like Germany, you're not only going to have a lot of divisions that need a lot of support artillery, but that support artillery is going to help on both the defense and the offense.
Yep.
So again, it's recommended.
So.
But with your standard division, leg army infantry, I would not recommend going whole hog on support equipment.
Yep.
One example that you do want to go whole hog on, again, is special forces, because it's all about enhancing, very small, highly effective divisions, either special forces or tanks, for instance, because those are the ones that you're going to either get the beachhead or you're going to be pushing. So for something like tanks, you'll want to start thinking about things like maybe maintenance company. Sometimes you don't need it, sometimes you do, and definitely logistics. And then after that, maybe signals. But the more, if you look at the research time on this does take a lot of research to do these logistics.
157 days.
So sometimes you only want to research it like once. Maybe you want to research the 1939 version. And the good thing about it is once you research it once and you put it in your templates, at that point you don't have to worry about putting it in your template a second time. You just have to enhance it from level 1 to level 2, and then everything across the board gets it.
Is there anything that increases research speed for? Oh, okay. Land doctrine. Oh, this is doctrines, though, not the units. Right. Okay.
Well, units use the doctrine.
Units use the doctrine, but not. I mean the equipment. You don't have. It doesn't have the research bonuses there.
Germany won't have research bonuses for rifles or artillery.
Yeah, okay.
They do have research bonuses for things like,
Tanks?
the destroyers, light cruisers, tanks. Because yeah, you see that they get a huge time reduction on medium tanks. Medium tanks are not very good in multiplayer. They're trying to fix that, but they're not very good in multiplayer. What people usually do is instead they use that times 100 bonus and they use it on heavy tanks and they make Tigers.
Yep.
Because the problem is once you get to heavy tank 2s, they're kind of semi-unpierceable. And once you get to heavy tank 3s, they can't be pierced. The only way that you can pierce them by piercing them, that lets you do damage to them, is by another heavy tank. So in multiplayer, it's just a heavy tank game.
Yep.
For single player, I mean that's a huge bonus because you can get 1939 medium tanks out around January, February of 37. So you can have them in production years ahead of time, save up a ton of them, and then that's how you fly across Europe.
Just send it after that, pretty much. What does a times 2 times research bonus mean, and 1 times? What's the difference between the two of them?
Times 2 means you get 2 of those bonuses.
So it's like two bonuses for 2 research items each or something?
2 bonuses to land doctrine, and then you also get 100% bonus to what's listed underneath that.
Yep. So you can either use it for like Panzer 3, Panzer 4, 5, Panther, or Sonderkraftzeug. I'm sure I pronounced it wrong. 11. But only one of those.
You only get one use of it, yes, but
Okay.
it works on every single one of those Panzer models. Basically, you're looking at light, medium, and heavy tanks.
Yep.
But it's a very strong bonus for sure. And again, like this is that whole crafting a build type thing where when you start looking at like how you want to like stage different things with like for instance Germany, you can make a build where you're trying, you're already researching this and you're going to do this and you're going to get this in play, and that way your bonuses go to another time like 1939 technology instead of just rushing down to a research slot. And again, it takes, you're going to have to play around with some builds. I'm just trying to go over things and explain how things work.
Yep.
But again, go back to research, look at like, go from like the support companies. You can see the tanks in play.
Yep, tanks.
So yeah, you've got your light tanks already researched, you have heavy ones researched, and you can see that like doing that bonus, you could immediately get to 1939 mediums and very quickly get those in production, and that directly leads to Panzer IVs. Once you get Panzer IVs, you get a little bit of bonus to going over to Tigers. Researching either Tiger to Panzer IV or Panzer IV to Tiger costs 90% of what it would be normally. Yep. So there's a little bit of synergy bonus. And what a lot of people do in games is they make one kind of tank. I actually like both. If I'm doing like single player, if I'm doing multiplayer, unfortunately it's all
heavies, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but in single player, I like to do a little bit of both because they're both useful and they both use slightly different resources. Now, this is an example of resources. Hold Shift and click on the Panzer IV, and then while holding Shift still, click on the Tiger. And then you can look at the very top where it says, like in that panel for Panzer Kampfwagen 6 Tiger, just click on it and drag it to the side.
Okay, wait, sorry, what do I need to do again?
Hold Shift and then click on Tiger and then drag it to the side from the top. There you go. So what you can see here is directly how much time it will research. It's going to cost a little bit more for a heavy tank.
Yep.
But also the production cost. You can see the production cost on mediums is 13, heavies is 27. You need less tanks with a heavy tank division than we do with a medium tank, but we already know that these tanks are going to cost more. Yep. Also, you can see the difference in stats, from hardness to soft attack to hard attack to piercing to armor rating. And notice the heavy tank is 110 armor. That's monstrous.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, notice the medium tank
only has about 80.
81, which means the medium tank by default cannot pierce the heavy tank. Now there are variants. If you look at those tanks again, you see that little there's little panels off to the side with like it looks like a bullet, an explosion, and aircraft. Those are the variants. So like for instance, the Stug is the anti-tank variant or specialized tank of that line.
Yep.
So that the Stug 3 ends up having a piercing of 88 instead of 81. So it's made to just kill tanks, but notice that soft attack went down, etc., etc. It's made for a specific use, and with tier 3 tanks, aka mediums, like you don't have to research those specialties, for the most part. But when you get to like Panzer 4, then you might want to start thinking that, because the Panzer 4, if you look at the Panzer 4, it has a piercing of 810. So it is actually made to try to kill a heavy tank. You'll never really fully get there, unfortunately, due to how the math and the divisions, etc. go. But again, they're trying to fix mediums.
Yep.
But what I wanted to show you here in this is, both the production costs, the stat costs, and notice how they use slightly different materials.
Yep.
The medium tank takes a little bit of tungsten and then 3 steel, whereas the heavy tank takes 3 steel and 3 chromium. Which means when you start putting these into your production lines, you're going to have to acquire, as Germany, because Germany doesn't start with much tungsten. It starts with almost no chromium as well. So you're going to have to end up buying tungsten or chromium from some outside.
So you got to actually plan your resources before you actually finish your research and everything.
You have to look ahead about where you're going to get it. You're either going to get it through war and conquest, or you're going to get it through purchasing. So every time, if you look at your production screen, it's that little gear with a wrench in it.
Yep.
Now, if you look at your production screen, it shows you what you have positive and what you have negative.
Negative on rubber?
Negative on rubber because you're not producing it. And with synthetic factories, you could be producing your own rubber.
Yep.
But early Germany, you'll probably end up buying the rubber from, like, let's say, the Dutch East Indies.
Yep.
And because you wouldn't want to give it to like England, because you're just feeding them a factory. So what happens is whenever you want to buy, like, for instance, a rubber from, but Dutch East Indies, it would cost 1, and that means that it gives them 1 civilian factory, but you get 8 rubber total out of it.
Oh, so you just set up the convoys to deal to get this?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Then we can send it right away. Send the convoy.
The moment you purchase it, it immediately starts going.
Yep.
Like when it clicks over 1 day to January 2nd, you'll suddenly get 8 rubber, which means you'll actually be 3 rubber ahead.
Yep.
And what you want to keep, like, I find that you want to keep, as best, you want to have all these resources slightly red, and by that I mean like 2 or 3, because at 2 or 3 you're looking at a production inefficiency of just like 5 or 10% or so. It's not that big of a deal, but once you get down there like to -7 or so, that's when it starts hurting. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of not worry about it.
That's how you see
just
the
a little bit under.
resources.
Right.
So Italy's also got a little bit of chromium or tungsten, whichever one it
Chromium.
is. Yep.
They have a
Turin.
little bit of chromium, not much. But if you take a look at Yugoslavia, there's 124 there.
Wow, that's a lot.
See, and this goes into the whole planning. And then you look, also what Yugoslavia have is look at all the aluminum they have. And aluminum combined with rubber is going to be planes. So by taking Yugoslavia, it's going to net you more materials to build both planes and your heavy tanks.
Okay.
So again, it's about finding out what your build is going to be, what your resources you're going to need, and then also how to acquire said resources.
Yep. So I guess, turn 1 or like day 1, that's when you're going to do the most work. You're going to mostly be in the pause screen trying to work out what order you want to do your national focuses, how you build stuff, where you want to build stuff, and eventually what resources you're going to need, and also how to set up what direction you want to start attacking or claiming nations for your own.
Yep, but whether you're in historical or you're in ahistorical, which is do whatever you want, and countries, some countries, we're currently in historical focuses.
Yep.
So everything will essentially follows a script, except for you. You're the one person that doesn't. Players don't. But everything else, they'll do this focus, then this focus, then this focus. They'll react this way. But if you do a game without historical focuses, like other countries can do whatever they want. Like you might see Japan go communist. You might see France go fascist. You might see a civil war in the United States. I mean, I think it can kind of go any which way.
Anything can
But
happen.
if you're doing it, anything can happen. But as Germany, especially as Germany single player, you're probably going to be crawling over Europe for the most part.
Yep.
And keeping everything for yourself. In multiplayer, Germany is going to have a number of puppet states to help it out. You're going to have Hungary, you're going to have Romania, you're going to have Bulgaria, you're going to have Romania. Those are going to help you do specific things. Like usually Hungary becomes the air controller, so you send them all the planes.
What do you mean by air
Italy.
controller?
So air controller means that the only thing that they do is they're going to handle the air, and that way you don't have to worry about putting planes and fight for air dominance. They handle that for you. And in multiplayer, when you have all these other people like on the front lines trying to micro and trying to fight and everything, it's better to have dedicated air controllers than to have the person that's playing like Germany do it, because Germany has all these troops and divisions anyway. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
it becomes a little bit too much.
Gotcha.
So
Too
the
much
rest
for
of
us
this,
mere mortals.
a little bit too much for the mortals. Yeah. Let's go over the land doctrine real quick, because we're like almost halfway through the tech as it is, and then we can move on to something else. So land doctrine is another one of those choices, and it depends on what country you pick, what you're going to do, etc., etc.
Yep.
By default, Germany starts in mobile warfare doctrine, which isn't a bad doctrine if you're using tanks. The other option for Germany that works out really well is actually superior firepower, especially in single player. If you're playing single player, superior firepower is kind of the way to go, and the reason why is because it excels at doing damage, it's pretty good on the defense, and it doesn't really have anything negative going for it. Mobile warfare is all about keeping on the offense and then stopping a little bit and then going back on the offense a little bit. Superior is very stable, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Grand Battle Plan is very much a United Kingdom type idea of very slow and steady wins the race. And it's all about building what's called planning bonus. And I'll go over that when we get into the actual divisions and combat and everything else. But Grand Battle Plan, a lot of people hate it, but it can actually work for you, because again, it's a slow and steady build. You're not going to win wars really, really fast. You want to win wars really fast? Mobile warfare, superior firepower. Grand Battle Plan is about, I'm going to make a little bit of gain, then I'm going to stop. I make a little bit of gain, and I stop. That's just how it works.
Yep.
And if you do Grand Battle Plan, infiltration is by far the better side of it, the right-hand side, than assault on the left. For some reason, the assault tree is just not very, very amazing, and I'll go over these other ones too. But mass assault doctrine is exactly what it sounds like. It's not guns that are a resource; men are a resource. Think the Soviets.
Yeah.
That's mass assault. And the reason why is if you go down the right-hand side of mass assault and you get down to human wave offensive, they get an extra 5% recruitable population. And this actually bypasses a lot of weird like population recruitment modifiers in the game. So mass mobilization can all of a sudden make some countries that have a very limited, like let's say 200, 300k manpower pool, all of a sudden change to like 2.3 million manpower.
That's crazy, dude.
It's very crazy when you
Oh
see it. It's like
wow!
it all of a sudden happens. You're like, what just happened? And it makes no sense.
I have men
But
coming out of nowhere.
yeah, all of a sudden, like everyone raises their hands, and my axe. Um, it becomes pretty crazy how fast you can get manpower when you can bypass population control type stuff.
Yeah.
A good example of population control is India. Go ahead and hit escape and right click on. Actually, it might not be here, unfortunately, with India. Let's see if it is.
4 to 5.6 million. And what's the government right now? Volunteer only, recruitable population 1.5%. So you add an extra 5%, and that's going to be about a 20 million or something. That's nuts.
See, and this is the base game. Like this would not be like this in another game. And the reason why is because the DLC Together for Victory changed India.
Yeah.
And so India in my game only has about 250,000, not 4 to 5 million manpower, because they have a what's called agrarian society recruitable population minus 60%,
Oh,
and it
okay.
really hits that population issue where you don't get nearly as much manpower. In your game, British Raj is the way to go. Like look at all this manpower. But for a other normal game, it would be affected much differently.
So they just basically set up the British Raj that way to actually, afterwards to actually, nerf that strat or something.
It was probably made like that because it's a colony. It's not a major country like
Yep.
England, France, Germany, USA. They probably made it like that just because India actually fielded one of the largest militaries in history, and in terms of volunteer force, like 2.3 million in World War II. So that's what that manpower is for. So
Yeah.
they could actually field something like that. And then in Together for Victory, they made it so you had to go down decisions, or I should say focus trees, to get that recruitment instead of just having it natively.
Gotcha.
But going back to the focus tree, the land doctrines. Some of these trees, like in terms of like when you look at like what people recommend, sometimes they say left right or right right or left left,
Yeah.
and that's looking at these land doctrines. And mobile warfare doctrine is a perfect example. When someone says left right, it means you go down, then you go down mobile infantry, and then you go down modern blitzkrieg.
God, desperate defense. What an icon. It's a man with a Panzerfaust in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Non-discriminatory conscription. Ah, yeah, you'll do. Fall in line.
Yep. And then you have, of course, the werewolf gorillas, which an interesting one. But yeah, if you do mobile warfare, I'm gonna just say this right out of the gate. Do not go down blitzkrieg. Modern blitzkrieg is great. Blitzkrieg on the right-hand side, the first right-hand side, is actually very bad. It looks good. It's really not. It's kind of a trap, for lack of words. Mobile infantry is the way you want to go, not blitzkrieg.
Okay, so just for reference, like, why is Blitzkrieg not very good?
Glad you asked. So the first icon there, Onward Spearhead, your tanks are going to get breakthrough 20%, org 3 gives you the tactic blitz. The next one down, org plus 2, 10% recovery rate. So you're looking at a 5 org so far. And then Blitzkrieg itself gives another +1 and another 0.1 recovery rate. Gives you the tactic breakthrough. So you're really just looking at 20% breakthrough and +6 organization. So +6 organization, while it looks good, you had to go through 3 different researches to get it.
Yep.
That's not exactly a huge amount for 3 researches. The 20% breakthrough looks really good, except for the fact that you hit the soft cap on breakthrough in this game pretty easily. So once you go past that soft cap and you essentially have all this breakthrough that you're not using, it's always nice to see more breakthrough, but do you need it? And the answer is
no.
usually not. Now, if you look at mobile infantry, right out of the gate, it's helping like everything possible. Um, from trucks to armored cars to towed artillery, etc. And you're getting all this recovery rate on all of those. That's good. Then you look at mass mobilization, all infantry, motorized, and mech, organization plus 10. So that's going to help every single division you have, whether it's a leg infantry or a tank division,
Yep.
compared to that upper blitzkrieg where you only got 3 organization just for tanks.
Yep.
And then you have motorized defensive, and then tanks get a +3 organization right off that. So and they get even more bonuses as well for other organizations. So again, something about organization is how long a unit stays in combat. That's pretty much how it works.
Yep.
You have both organization and HP. The biggest thing you usually end up fighting is organization, not the HP.
Yep.
Because what you want to do is you want to deorg a unit. And when you deorg a unit, you've essentially defeated that unit and it has to fall back and it gets off the front line. If you're attacking a unit and you end up deorging because you just can't win the fight, you stop fighting and then your unit essentially rests and gets its org up again.
Gotcha.
So having a lot of org helps you on both the offense and the defense.
Okay.
So that's why mobile infantry ends up being a lot better than blitzkrieg. I've seen blitzkrieg used well, and it's a very, very like super sketchy niche use, and it's when you have somebody that's like specialized in like a very specific tank to use it. But overall, you're always going to do mobile infantry. It's just what you want to do.
Basically a cheese strat if you're going blitzkrieg. Mobile infantry's a lot more
very
stable.
Weird, cheesy strat, exactly.
Yeah.
But once you get down to modern blitzkrieg, you either do desperate defense or you do modern blitzkrieg, and that's when you have to make that determination of what country you're playing and what your situation is. For instance, if you're in a situation where you don't have manpower left, you're looking up there and you're looking at like your recruitment and you're like, I might as well do desperate defense, because hey, if you don't have manpower, you can't do anything.
Well, recruitable plus 2% here as well.
Well, there's 2% and the other one's 3%. So
5% or up. Yeah.
That's a lot, but if you're doing fine on manpower, modern blitzkrieg is going to make that performance go way up.
Yeah, because you get infantry, motorized mech, plus 10% organization. That's crazy.
It's a super crazy side of it. So mobile warfare can be very, very good. You go down, you go left, you go right. There's definitely performance there.
Yeah.
Superior firepower, if you take a look at it, people usually do go down and they go to the right. They don't go to the left.
No.
And the difference in dispersed and integrated. Dispersed is considered line infantry. So, and then integrated is your support companies. People do the integrated support because it ends up giving more performance more easily than using dispersed support.
Right.
And I'll go into details on that. You're just gonna have to trust me almost every single time you want to go integrated. And then when you get down there to mechanized offensive, then you either go air-land battle or you do shock and awe. And the difference is shock and awe is usually more of a infantry thing, and air-land battle is a more tank and air integration.
Yep.
And the reason why is if you look at the very bottom of air-land battle, when you're in combat, you get an air superiority of 20%. That's really good.
Yep.
And so if you're the air controller and the land controller, going air-land battle, especially when you have tanks, ends up being a really, really good bonus. Usually in multiplayer, people just they go down, they go to the right, they go to the right. Like, most countries that do infantry and whatnot.
Yep.
For instance, if you were playing like an infantry British Raj, and you didn't have to worry about the recruitment population so much, they might do superior firepower and do right and have really effective infantry. If they had a problem with population, they'd probably do mass assault and do mass mobilization on the right hand side. Deep battle is kind of more of a tank thing, and it helps with supply. But most people, when they do mass assault, they end up going mass mobilization simply because of the the population involved.
Yep. Okay.
Any questions about this so far?
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I guess it'll make more sense once I actually start using it, but for right now, you know, we're still at you know, day one as well, so
Different countries, different doctrines. It's simple as that.
yeah.
I'm just gonna say, unless you have a manpower problem, you can almost never go wrong doing superior firepower. Um, Mobile warfare is entirely if you're going to have tanks at all. If you're not going to have tanks at all, don't do mobile warfare. Do superior firepower.
Yep, because you can't sustain a push pretty much.
It's made for tanks. It's made for rapid advancement of tanks. That's exactly what it's there for.
Yep.
Superior firepower is the most stable. I mean, if we had five doctrines, superior firepower would be in the middle, and the reason why is because it's kind of the bread and butter.
Yep.
It works. It's very, very good at what it does. It doesn't have any disadvantages. It's all about advantages. But like if you're looking at like specialized things, again, like pushing fast with mobile warfare, or you want to do a slow but steady strategy with grand battle plan. There's that. You need more population really, really quick. Mass assault. It's one of those decision making. It's not one doctrine fits every country. It's what country am I playing? What build am I going to do?
Yep.
So, going over one, we have Navy stuff: destroyers, cruisers, battleships, carriers, and submarines.
Yep.
So, Navy, in my opinion, is a whole other chapter. So I'm going to go over this like super, super easy and quick.
Mm-hmm.
And you're using the older one where you actually have like battle cruisers and super heavies. Like that Panzerschliff H-41 is, that's a super heavy battleship. That would be like a Yamato. You could make Yamatos as Germany, just by researching that. Seriously, yeah.
Huh. Okay.
They're pretty strong. They're not as good as they could be. I mean, battleships in general are not as good as they could be in this game.
Yep.
But going as like a simple little thing here. You have screens and you have capital ships. Submarines are their own class. Submarines are not built for the most part, to destroy ships in this game, other than convoys.
Yep.
They're really made for convoy raiding, not destroying other ships. That said, in World War II, there were plenty of carriers that were destroyed because of one sub fired once or twice.
Yep.
But for the most part, subs don't kill many ships in this game. For the most part, they kill. By ships, I'm talking combat ships.
So it's more combat ship on combat ship, right?
Right. The subs are made to chew away at somebody's convoys.
Gotcha.
Because once you chew away all their convoys, you can't trade, you can't get supplies to troops.
Can't build stuff.
Starving. Yeah. So your screens are your destroyers and your cruisers. And you need to have a certain number of screens per heavy ship, aka capital ship.
Yep.
Now, cruisers, you can see that you have two different cruisers, and that you're using an old 1.0 screen, which is, for the most part, this is 1.0. And this is fine, because this actually works really well to explain. So, notice that you have if you move up a little bit.
M-Class and Prince Eugen.
Yep, Leipzig and Hippo. So, Leipzig class is a light cruiser. Hippo class, notice it has that little diamond icon on it.
Yep.
That's to denote it's a capital ship. So capital ships are kind of the back row, and the screens are in the front. And you need a certain amount of screens per capital ship, and this is what's called fleet positioning. Some people ignore it, some people don't. I find doing a really good fleet composition is better than just spamming one type of ship.
Gotcha. I guess I have to look up what would be a good fleet composition in that case.
A good example of a good fleet composition is for every heavy ship you have, either a heavy cruiser like the Hippo class,
Yep.
or a battle cruiser like the York class or O class, or a battleship like the Scharnhorst class. So you have, those are your heavy ships, your capital ships.
Yep.
For every capital ship you have 2 light cruisers and about 4 destroyers. So it's 1, 2, 4.
1, 2, for every battleship, heavy cruiser, 2 light cruisers, and
2
4.
light.
About 4 destroyers. Right, gotcha.
So yeah, you kind of think of it as like your wingmen.
Yep.
You have a battleship and it has 2 light cruisers. Both light cruisers have 2 destroyers.
Okay.
Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you scroll down, you'll see aircraft carriers. These are also capital ships. And I wish they wouldn't use this blue icon. I wish they'd use something like red or green or something. And the reason why is because carriers, while they're considered capital ships, they use capital ships as a screen. So you can't damage a carrier until you kill their screens, aka battleships or heavy cruisers
Yep.
or battle cruisers or whatnot. So if you send out an aircraft carrier, it should always have 1 capital ship, whether it's a battleship, a battle cruiser, or even a heavy cruiser. Like, it doesn't matter. A heavy cruiser is still considered a screen for 1 carrier.
Yep.
So always, always, always send out at least 1 or 2 capital ships with each carrier. Carriers are very good in the game,
Mm-hmm.
but they need to be supported properly.
Yep.
And again, like, this is something you're gonna have to, like, read something up on. I'm being really, really brief on it, and you also have the easy version of this compared to like Man the Guns, which is a DLC that it goes into modules in terms of like how you want to build a ship.
Okay,
Because
that's a bit crazier.
You can get really, like, customizy when it comes to making these ships, like later on. Like the ships that you have now, you click on them, it just shows you the stats, and
Yeah.
that you don't have to care. But you could do things like having like better armor, better engines, better spotting, better depth charges, better torpedoes. There's a lot of little things that you're able to do in Man the Guns, and you even put radar on the ships as well. So you can definitely make a really high performance ship with Man the Guns, but unfortunately it does take research time to do so.
Yep.
But once you figure out like what works for you, you can be like, I'm going to ignore this stuff and I'm going to focus on this. And for what you have right now in essentially the 1.0-ish screen, again, it's you research it once, you're done.
Yep.
And you don't have to worry about modules, which I'll say is also kind of refreshing compared to researching modules.
Yeah, I
But,
mean, you can go really crazy on it, but I guess you'd need a build that is very specific to very heavy naval build to, justify it, kind of thing. So you're not...
I mean, you have to,
Yeah.
you got to play like a big naval country like England or the USA or Japan, or even in some cases France, and also Italy. Like, there's basically 5 very, very naval countries out there. There's also some naval miners out there as well, like take the Netherlands, for instance, or Australia even has a token naval force in World War II.
Yep.
And you can customize that and grow that naval force quite well as Australia if you kind of take the reins essentially. So you can do more than what some people expect you to do. It's just you have to know how to do it, and you figure that out with play. So let's go back to the research screen, and to the right of naval, click on the second blue tab there, and that's naval doctrines. And this is easier to explain.
Right, because you don't have to make particularly major choices, one tree or the other. You can just pick everything in a particular doctrine and that's it.
So you've got 3 trees, and pretty much it comes down to what bonuses these trees give to certain naval units.
Yep.
Fleet and Being is all about like light cruisers and destroyers, and also doing fleet protection against subs. It's very, very, very good about fleet detection when it comes to subs and keeping your convoys safe. Trade interdiction is just the opposite. It's all about destroying convoys. and also not being detected. So
Mm.
trade interdiction is a very offensive mess with somebody type doctrine. You know, just like Germany and Italy, for instance, usually go in games go down trade interdiction. One, because Germany already has it researched, and two, a lot of Germany players they just build a bunch of subs and they just go. But there's other advantages in trade interdiction that a lot of people don't take advantage of. Trade interdiction is probably, again, kind of like superior firepower, the most bread and butter of the doctrines, because it has a lot of bonuses against for a lot of different ships. So it's actually not a bad doctrine choice at all. It's actually a really good one for the most part.
Yep.
Base strike to the right is about destroyers and aircraft carriers. It doesn't do too much with cruisers. It doesn't do too much with battleships, a little bit here and there, but mostly it's all about carriers and destroyers. It's a very USA doctrine, and honestly, I think it's actually gone down in power over the years compared to trade interdiction and fleet and being. It's still not bad. It's better than nothing. But if you're not using 4 aircraft carriers in a fleet, by the way, that's your limit. 4. After 4, you start taking penalties.
Mm.
But if you're not using 4 aircraft carriers, you should probably be using the other doctrines.
Yep.
Fleet and being on the left-hand side, again, very, very good still, but it's all about protecting convoys. It's all about pretty even bonuses and finding and killing submarines. Trade interdiction is all about messing with convoys. So again, it's about playstyle. Like, what kind of fleet am I going to have? What am I going to do with it? You know, what kind of bonuses do I need?
Yep.
Let's click on the plane for air, and you'll see Germany starts with a lot of air pre-researched.
And then you can also get carrier versions.
And you can get the carrier versions, exactly. Some countries start with the carrier versions pre-researched. England, for instance, and Australia, as well as Japan, will have some of those already researched.
Yep.
But Germany is very much land war. They're not worried about carriers. Not saying don't build carriers as Germany. Like, if you can fit it into your build, they're highly effective. But
there's not many places you can use carriers anyway, because you've got all these land airports if you want to be a continental power.
Yep, but if you want to be a sea power, carriers can help, and you can actually make, for instance, like take Australia for example, you can actually research carrier planes and just build carrier planes right out the gate, and you can use them. You can use them on both airports and an aircraft carrier.
Yep.
So you can, because for instance, a miner like Australia, you're not going to have a billion, military factories. You can just say, I'm going to have probably 30, military factories overall. I'm just going to specialize in one. I need one kind of fighter, but it needs to do everything I need it to do. And even though carrier fighters cost a little bit more, I just want the efficiency of one production line, one type of thing, and it's good for everything.
Yep.
But yeah, Germany starts with a very, very good pre-researched air situation. So let's talk about air real quick, and we'll demonstrate that when you get into combat eventually here. But everything kind of revolves around what kind of air you have, and by that I mean, do you have green air, yellow air, or red air?
What do you mean by that?
By green air, it means you have air superiority.
Yep.
When you have air superiority,
okay.
everything is going your way.
Mm-hmm.
Both killing enemy planes, but also so that your close air support, your naval bombers, your tactical bombers, they can do what they need to do. Because close air support helps deorg the enemy units, as well as destroy a little bit of equipment here and there.
Yep.
Tactical bombers, they can do that. Tactical bombers are kind of the Swiss Army knife. They can do close air support like close air support planes do. They don't do it as well, but they do it at a very long distance, so they can use those back-end airports instead of frontline airports. So you put fighters and close air support on frontline airports, and on the airports farther behind, farther safe, like say in Germany, Berlin, etc., you can use tactical bombers, and therefore they help do what they need to do, but they're not taking up those frontline critical airports like a fighter or a close air support would be.
Yeah,
And then
gotcha.
you have, and what also tactical bombers can do is they can do strategic bombing. What strategic bombing is doing is it's attacking infrastructure, like infrastructure, anti-air, airports, ports, etc. It can do all of that. Again, it's kind of the Swiss Army knife of bombers. The strategic bomber can only do strategic bombing. It can't do close air support or anything like that. It's made to kill things like factories and infrastructure and airfields. And in multiplayer, they're almost always banned because they are really strong.
Yeah.
Because you can bomb somebody. If you make enough of them, you can just bomb somebody in the Stone Age, and that's pretty much what happens.
Yep.
Happens very quickly, unfortunately, if you build enough of them. But you can do the same thing with tactical bombers. I've played games where I've ended up having 5,000 to 6,000 tactical bombers or more, and I've basically done the same thing. You just have to have a lot of them.
Yep.
And then after you're done tactical bombing, you just switch them over to close air support, and oh, look at all that close air support damage! Yay!
You just
So
you delete the factories and then you delete the armies pretty much. That okay? I see what you mean by Swiss Army knife here.
yeah, because like you prevent their ability to produce equipment and
Yep.
repair, etc. And then you
Replace
push
losses exactly.
Yep, and then you push in, and then like any equipment that they lose, that's almost gone for good. That said, tactical bombers and close air support, they both do close air support, but those close air support like that, JU-87, that JU-87, if you look at the stats on it, is much better at close air support than the tactical bomber is. So if you're relying on close air support, those close air support planes, the fighters essentially on the left-hand side, those will work a lot better than tactical bombers will.
So you got the ground attack, which is 10 here, and tactical bomber here, which is ground attack is 6 here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then look at the 1940 versions where it goes up to 15 versus 10.
Yep.
And you also have to look at the production cost of it. You're looking at a production cost of 24 versus 39. So you're going to be producing a lot more, and they're going to be a lot more effective than a tactical bomber.
And you also have a lot more less resources as well by like one aluminum.
Right. Well, usually Germany doesn't hurt that much for aluminum because you can take aluminum around Europe. Germany's bigger problem is the rubber.
Yep. Gotcha.
But again, this goes into composition of like how many fighters do I need, how much close air support do I need, how many tactical bombers I need, and also tactical bombers. If you look at them, they can also do naval strike, which is just attacking naval units. They're actually very, very good at killing submarines, for instance.
Yep.
So when it comes to using them in the ocean, it's kind of a toss-up between naval bombers and tactical bombers. Naval bomber ones don't have very good range compared to tactical bombers, for sure. I mean, you're looking at naval bombers at 8,500 kilometers versus a tactical bomber of 2,400.
Wow, okay. I look at the 1941, that's 930 to 2,500.
Exactly.
Big
yeah,
difference.
I mean, there's big difference in range. The advantage of naval bombers, though, is that they don't use fuel until they attack something.
Yep.
So what you can do is when you make these naval bombers, is you can put them on airfields, say Malta in the middle of the Mediterranean, for instance. You make some naval bombers, you put them on Malta as England, and then you say naval strike here. They don't use any fuel until somebody sees a ship, and then they all take off. They do their naval strike. You lose some fuel, they go home. Whereas if you're using tactical bombers, when you set them on naval strike, they start using fuel until you tell them to stop.
Right. So the naval strike just naval aircraft just basically responds to stuff where the tactical essentially is like doing patrols here and there to try to find something.
Yeah, they're combing around essentially compared to the naval aircraft. They wait until they're called, essentially.
Yep.
Someone gets on the radio.
Yeah, I can kind of see that being useful in Malta, though. Like, the range doesn't matter here at all in the Mediterranean.
Yep, because you can cover almost the entire zone with naval ones. So definitely a thing. And now, if you look at Gibraltar in the Mediterranean, it does have an airfield on it. It has an airfield of 2, but it's not going to be able to cover the entire Western Med with just that,
Yep.
with naval bombers. So this would be more of an example of tactical bombers being more useful for the Western Med, and naval bombers being more useful for Gibraltar, and then maybe even running naval bombers off Cyprus.
Okay.
So just examples of being efficient in certain types of builds, like how much you want to research, what you want to research, etc. Air power is strong in this game.
Yep.
It is strong. It's one of those things you don't want to skimp on. And fighters are supremely important, because if you don't get green air, all of a sudden everything else, from close air support, naval bombers, tactical bombers, strategic bombers and single player, whatever, all those stop being effective.
Life starts getting a lot harder, pretty much.
Exactly, because they're shooting down or interrupting, what those are doing, and so they stop having an effect on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Heavy fighters are something I didn't cover, and heavy fighters are one of those things where some people use them, some people hate them, some people will just refuse to ever build them at all. If you look at the stats on them compared to the fighter, the heavy fighters have a really good range. They have a really good air attack, but they don't have agility. And the agility is kind of what makes fighters tanky.
Yep.
Because they avoid things. The thing is that air attack is really, really good for one thing: interception. If you have green air and you have some heavy fighters, and you just set the heavy fighters to interception, what that does is those heavy fighters, they'll go after close air support, they'll go after strategic bombers, they'll go after tactical bombers, they'll go after naval bombers. They go after anything but fighters. And if the enemy is trying to use close air supports, tacticals, naval bombers, and these catch them because of that high air attack, they usually delete them. So heavy fighters can actually be very, very good if you invest in them. And it's that whole thing of like, how much do I invest in them and how many do I build? Because they do have a cost. They're not as costly as fighters, but they are a little bit more costly, and they take a little bit of research to do. So it's that question of, do I build them, and do I research them, and if I research them, how much do I research, and how do I go to 1940 tech, or I just stick with the 36 tech? And it's that questionable thing of like, are they useful to me?
Yep.
And the answer is always, what's your build? What's your plan? So
would heavy fighters be more reactionary kind of thing? So if you see someone going for like a heavy bomber build, then you can get more heavy fighters to counter that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If they're going heavy into tacticals and CAS and strategic bombers, for instance, you could definitely try countering that with more heavy fighters.
Yep.
But in the end of the day, like, it's all about getting green air. If you can just get green air with your fighters alone, and these heavy fighters also help with getting green air. It's just they're not nearly as effective at shooting down fighters as other fighters are. They're made to kill. They're made to prey on the weak, essentially, and the weak are going to be close air support, naval bombers, tacticals, etc.
Strategic.
Because that's what they're made to kill things that give bonuses to armies, essentially.
Yep.
So again, I recommend not ignoring them, but not making a billion of them. Like,
No.
you want to make a lot of fighters, and then you make the other stuff.
Yep.
Because just getting green air in itself is a bonus, because it penalizes the enemy.
Yep.
So you always want to try to get green air. So let's move over to the doctrines, which is the second red tab. Now, this is more confusing. And the reason why I'm going to say that is a lot of these trees end up being kind of the same when it gets down to the bonuses. In terms of like what the overall bonuses are, like in terms of like how much air superiority bonus you get, interception, or this or that. And it usually comes down to a couple little tricks in terms of like what kind of planes am I using. people in multiplayer and people overall have been using strategic destruction, not because they're using strat bombers in multiplayer, but because it gives just a little bit of air superiority bonus in it compared to the other ones, which they kind of snuck in the update.
Yep.
Battlefield support is kind of all about using CAS, and operational security or operational integrity is more about using naval bombers and tactical bombers. So the best thing you can really do is really look up the wiki and go, show me the doctrine bonuses for like the totals, and then look at the totals and go, okay, that's the one I want to pick. Overall, though, I'd just say doing strategic destruction on the left-hand side is pretty stable.
Yep.
It's what people are going to use in multiplayer, but at the same time, if you're playing single player, you could do any of these. It wouldn't matter. Like, you start with Battlefield support as Germany. You could just continue with Battlefield support as single player. You'll do just fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
And then we kind of went over like electronics and industry, but what I want to show you in electronics, because we went more over industry, but take a look at electronics, is that it's a combination of 4 things really. You have both your electronics for research, computing, but you also have the left-hand side, which is the radio, radar, etc. And once you research radar level 1, 2, or 3, it lets you build up to that level. So once you research radar 1, you can build radar 1. Once you research radar 2, you can build radar 2. What the bonus is radar 2 is going to be a little bit bigger than radar 1, but it's also going to give you a better bonus for finding both naval fleets that it touches in that area, as well as planes that are flying in that area.
Doesn't give you a range bonus at all or something, or?
It gives you, every version has a bigger and bigger range.
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah, but it also gives you a bigger and bigger bonus. So radar ends up being quite powerful, like if you start using it, because once you start getting to like 38, 39, 40 level 1940 radar, those bonuses start getting pretty chonky. So, for instance, England, World War II, they had the home radar system. Worked very, very well. They intercepted a lot of German fighters that were trying to sneak over the channel.
Yep.
Perfect example. Like, radar is good in the game. If you're playing a very heavy air game, radar should not be ignored, especially on the defense. I find radar is amazing on the defense because it makes it a lot harder for the enemy to try to contest you. Now, we went over the bonuses on that, and then there's atomic research, and then there's experimental rockets. Atomic research 1940 does give you a little bit more research bonus. I would not worry about it at all unless you're going to make a nuclear weapon. If you're going for atomics, it's going to be a long road.
Yeah.
Because you can see it's 1945 for atomic weapons. Now, a lot of countries, and I mean a lot of countries, get bonus for nuclear weapon research.
Yep.
Whether it's like a 1 times 100 bonus or a 2 times 100 bonus. Some countries just have a lot of bonuses to it. Sometimes you research 1940 like yourself, and then you use your 2 bonuses on the other thing, and you try to get nuclear weapons in 43, 44 or something like that. But it's one of those things that, again, you kind of have to wait to do. And you can only be delivered by a strategic bomber. So you have to build like 1 strategic bomber.
Yep.
But again, it's a very long-term plan. Like, that's 9 years into the game.
Yep.
The experimental rockets, that is twofold actually. In the artillery screen, you can actually get rocket artillery, but also it's for making jet engines for jet fighters. So again, long-term planning and thinking.
Yep.
And usually you don't have to use this right-hand side at all. Like, you don't have to worry about atomics or experimental rocketry and whatnot. You can really just not care. It's long-term stuff. One of those things that you kind of have to plan for to do.
Yep.
Also keep in mind, remember that focus tree what gave you a bonus to industry? That is for industry, not electronics. Some focuses will give you a bonus to electronics research, but not industry research.
Okay. Right.
So, we went over that. We'll research a little bit. Let's go back and click on your flag and go over some of these real quick,
Yep. Give me 1 sec.
and then we'll get into combat. And by the way, do you need to get a drink or something?
Sure. All right. Let's go to the flag. Sure. Yep. Ready.
So, you've got your national focus. We went over that a little bit.
Yep.
And then we have laws and government. And also there's this occupied territories that you have. And it's currently gray because you're not occupying anything.
No.
When you do take over a country, occupied territories is going to be an important thing to note, because in your divisions, and we're going to go over these, you're going to pick what kind of division you want to occupy that territory with. Here's an example of something stupid. Don't occupy a territory with tanks.
No.
Occupy it with like an infantry build or a cavalry build or something, and kind of cut it down so all it is people with old rifles or whatever. You don't need to give them, submachine guns to hold down a country. Like, there's no extra bonus to it. They just need to have a rifle, and what'll happen with occupied territories is they will, once you take it over, it'll slowly increase in collaboration to the point where you don't have to worry about it as much.
Yep.
But bottom line, if they don't have rifles, they don't have equipment, they can't hold things down.
Nope.
Going down into laws and government, you have your conscription law, which right now it's unlimited conscription, 2.5% recruitable. And then you have extensive conscription, which moves it to from 2.5% to 5%. And that's a big difference, because you basically double your manpower or more, because you already have fielded manpower in the game, but you're going to get a lot of extra manpower, and that's really going to help long-term division building. But notice your training time gets increased by 10%. That's not that big of a deal. But right below that, service by requirement, now you go from 5% to 10%. That's another doubling in manpower, but you're going to pay the price in terms of construction speed, output, training time, etc. So if you're fighting, for instance, fighting the Soviets, and you're grinding through manpower like crazy, and you have to go to service by requirement, you're going to be producing less and constructing less. That's just how it's going to go.
Yep.
So you try to stay on extensive conscription, and you do your best to avoid service by requirement and all adults serve and scraping the barrel as long as possible. Like, you don't want to get in those situations where you start really affecting your factory output.
Yep.
Because that's kind of like a slippery slope. You're getting more manpower, but suddenly you're not getting the guns and equipment.
Yep. And it's very hard to balance it at this point.
But yeah, and the thing is, again, like, manpower is one of those things that, like, you're not going to get it back easy once you start going into deficits. Germany has some options to try to get better non-core manpower, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But yeah, it means you're, as the guy said in the channel, it means you're losing hard.
Yeah, pretty much.
But then right to the right of that limited conscription, you have your exploit law, and this is one of those examples where with limited conscription, it costs you 150 political power to go up or down. So every time you go up or down, it costs 150.
Yep.
With exploit laws, it costs 150 for whatever you want to do. So if you want to go to free trade, you can go to free trade. You want to go export focus, you can do that. Closed economy costs 150.
Right, and that makes sense because, this is like a very drastic change in, say, your population and what you're asking them to do, but this not so much.
Right. Some strategies that people do, because if you hover over limited exports, you can see you're not getting a lot of bonuses. Construction speed 5%, research 1, factory 5, and then you look at free trade and you're like, oh, construction speed 15%, research speed 10%, factory 15%, dockyard after. Why wouldn't I be on free trade? Well, if you look at it, it says resources to market plus 80%. That means 80% of everything that your country has goes to the free market, not to you.
Yep. Okay.
And that means you have to start using your civilian factories to buy back that material. So if you're Germany and you start going on that big build spree of building tanks and everything else, and you're like, why am I spending 40 or 50, 40 some civilian factories on a combination of steel and chromium? Well, you shouldn't be on free trade. You should be on export focused or limited exports.
Yep.
Because at that point you're saving civilian factories. With civilian factories, you could just build more military factories. There you go. So it's one of those decisions you have to make. Some multiplayer games, they like yell and scream that everyone needs to be on free trade, etc. It's the only way to go, blah, 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 blah. But the problem is people do what's called trade backs. And the theory is I buy 5 steel from you, you buy 5 things from me. And you have to trust that they actually, buy it back. Sometimes in the middle of combat and everything else, it's just not practical to try to police that. So I actually personally like export economy on a lot of my countries, simply because it's very balanced. I get to keep most of my half my resources, the other half go on the market. No one complains.
Yep.
It's a good mix. Going to go to a economy law. We kind of went over that earlier. We started as Germany starts at partial mobilization. You want to get to war economy as soon as you can, but you need 50 war support. Germany already starts at 35%. Now, the way to get more war support is a combination of a number of factors. You can get more war support directly from like national focuses. You can get it from sending an attaché to a conflict in progress. For instance, if we had the political power as Germany, we could actually send an attaché to Italy, because Italy is currently in a war with Ethiopia. The start of the game. And when you send an attaché, you get 10% war support.
Yeah.
So you'll go from 35 to 45 right there. And you can send up to 2 attachés. So you could have one attaché to Ethiopia, you could have another attaché to, let's say, like, fascist Spain when Spain pops off their civil war in July.
How do you start an attaché?
If you right-click on the country, like right-click on Italy.
Yep.
In the diplomacy screen, in the very middle, it's send attaché. It takes 100 political power and 50
Wait, send attaché?
manpower. Where is it on this?
Is it a DLC thing?
I think it's a DLC thing.
Okay.
I think about it. I mean, you're playing absolute vanilla. So
yeah,
and
exactly.
I've never played absolute vanilla. So,
fair enough.
I bet it's something they added in either Death or Dishonor or Together for Victory, one of those two.
Yeah.
But if you did have those, you could artificially inflate your war support with an attaché. A good example of using that attaché is like as Germany. It would not be for Italy and Ethiopia or even nationalist Spain. It would be when Japan declares war on China. Because you could send an attaché to China, and what happens is you get 20%, I think it's 20% of all the XP that they gain.
Yep.
Yourself. So you essentially end up getting free Army, Navy, and Air XP for them doing what they're doing, and you get war support. So it's very useful for like getting a lot of free stuff essentially. But you need to get 50% war support to go to war economy. It's not too hard because the other thing that affects it is world tension.
Yep.
World tension is in the upper right hand corner. It's that nice pretty Earth globe and then the percentile. And if you click on it, it'll actually show you. It says history is empty, but it'll actually show you what's actually spiked world tension in the last like couple years and whatnot. Now, as you do things as both like especially fascist countries, you're going to spike world tension. Spain having a civil war in July spikes world tension. You with your focus tree in going into the Rhineland adds to world tension. Japan going to war with China world tension, which lets everything starts spiraling out of control. Germany walks into Austria. Germany demands Czechoslovakia. Germany declares war on Poland. Boom! Before you know it, it's 100% world tension. That globe actually turns to fire, and everyone just goes crazy because the world gone mad.
World gone mad.
It really does start spiraling in world tension. Like after 1938, when it goes past 20%, that is like the point of almost no return.
Yeah.
Because at 20%, all the countries start doing things that do war sport stuff, and everything just goes absolutely bananas. But going back to the flag screen, again, we went over the political advisors. This is one of those choice things of like, what do you need now? What do you need later? A lot of countries they pick three of these political advisors, and then they stick with them. Example is like a lot of people when they first are able to take a political advisor, what they do is they take a silent workhorse because it's an extra 15% political power, and that helps right out of the gate for the rest of the game, because you're going to end up getting a lot more political power than you would have if you look throughout the entire game.
Yep, and then
Germany
it lets you get all the other upgrades that you need later on as well.
Right, yeah. So it's one of those things where it's going to benefit you more middle and later than it is picking, this and that early on. So
Yep.
The one thing I would suggest, never taking Rudolf Hess, because no matter what, when you go to war with England or whatever, Rudolf Hess crashes in England and you lose the advisor. Never take Rudolf Hess. Martin Bormann, sure, never Rudolf Hess. But I mean, you might, as a Germany player, you might take the Captain of Industry, you might take the War Industrialist, you might take Martin Bormann, and that's your three. But then later on, you might take Heinrich Himmler for the Prince of Terror, because if you look at him, he's going to give you more non-core manpower, less damage to garrisons, etc. So again, manpower. Something to think about. The other uses of political power are decisions, but the rest of this is research and production. So if you're making tanks, for instance, and researching tanks, these research companies, you need to actually have this research company before you finish researching something. So you could start researching like a medium or heavy tank, and then 2 or 3 months down the line, you get enough political power that you can take Porsche or Henschel or Man, and they apply those bonuses to those tanks.
Yep.
Some of these are just flat out better than others. One example of something that's really good, overall, like Henschel is really good, and the reason why is because max speed is always good, reliability is always good too. The medium tank designer is reliability and soft attack. Soft attack is really good. Porsche, armor, hard attack. Hard attack is killing tanks.
Yep.
So Porsche, you're not only going to be armored better, but your hard attack is going to be stronger. You're going to have tanks that kill other tanks, but you're still going to be able to walk over other infantry really, really well. So it's one of those things where, what kind of tanks are you making, and what are you trying to do with it? And quite frankly, all three of these on Germany are good. I personally do heavy tank design.
Yeah.
Simply because all that extra hard attack and armor, that's a lot.
Exactly.
But I mean, if you wanted to go with like Henschel and go max speed and reliability, I would never.
Nothing wrong with that.
I'd never say that's a horrible idea. I'd be like, okay, I'm behind that. I mean, max speed is nice because that means you encircle faster with tanks. So there's that. And then medium armor, again, soft attack. Hey, you just kill infantry faster.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, like, have a plan, but like, don't feel horrible if like you pick the wrong one or whatever. Looking at like the ship designer, Germany has only two available: the Atlantic Fleet designer, and then they have the raiding fleet designer. Now, the difference of this is the carriers' armor doesn't really matter on carriers, all right? Like because they shouldn't get hit anyway.
Yep.
The capital ship bonus for armor 10% and heavy attack %, that's nice. But raiding fleet, in my opinion, is even better. And the reason why is because like you could research your carriers without this even enabled like ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Get your carriers pre-researched, then take the raiding fleet designer, and then you don't have to worry about that deck size minus 10%. So you could just do it ahead of time, do the raiding fleet designer, and then when you're researching your submarines, your screens, your capital ships, essentially, then you have all those bonuses.
Yep.
And even though you do take a minus 10% heavy attack on capital ships for that, notice that the max speed is 10% and they're harder to see. So that means it's, you know, not only are they faster and they can evade hits, because that's actually what speed helps do, but since they're harder to see, it's harder for like naval aircraft to find them and hit them.
Gotcha.
So something to think about. And then of course you have aircraft designer, kind of the same thing. They, you know, bunch of options here. They all do something a little bit different. Something to always to think about as, you know, someone that builds planes is if you're building planes and you're going to be contesting air, light aircraft designer is going to be a must.
Yeah.
Because agility and max speed. Because this is the light aircraft, what you're going to build the most in terms of fighters, and this right here is if you only take one of these and you stick with it, because you can replace these with other ones with more political power. So if you want to start out with light aircraft designer and then you move to like junkers for CAS, then you want to do like another light aircraft research in like 1944, you'd have to buy the light aircraft designer again. Like you can bounce around if you want. But sometimes with some countries you just take one designer to fit all and then you roll with it.
Yep.
Other countries you take like two designers. For instance, what a good example of that, and again, Germany is a good example of this. Start out with light aircraft designer, do junkers, and for instance, like Japan would probably do light aircraft designer, and then they do the naval aircraft designer. And the reason why they do the naval aircraft designer is for naval bombers, CAS, and everything else, because a lot of Japan players will use pretty much carrier planes only.
Yeah.
They'll just have single production lines, and that's how they roll.
It's kind of the part of the world where range actually makes a big difference.
Yeah, more range, more effectiveness. Simple as that.
Pretty much.
Your other options, material designer. This isn't usually that impressive. It's just more research speed on like artillery or motorized or infantry equipment. If you're swimming in political power, maybe you do it, maybe you don't.
Not as important.
I wouldn't. It's not as important to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, it doesn't give you any extra bonuses that all these other ones to give you.
Yeah, it's just research speed, and if there was one I was going to take for Germany, it would probably be Opal for the motorized equipment, and the reason why, and this would be late, this would be like 1939, 1940, it would be so that I could research mechanized 1940 and 1942 a little bit faster, and I'd start replacing my trucks with mechanized, because that would be a better performance game than using trucks. But then that's only if I'm swimming in research speed.
I mean, yeah, that's a lot of more hardness, 100% more.
Yeah, but for other countries, I'd actually take the artillery designer.
Yep.
And the reason why is because the infantry equipment designer, it may help you on the gun and the support that's right above it, but the artillery designer is going to help you for anti-air, it's going to help you with artillery, you know, etc. Like it helps you with two different types of equipment, not just like a secondary bonus.
Okay.
But I mean, that, you know, the material designer is very optional in my opinion. You don't have to worry about it that much.
Yep.
It's very much an end game, you know, type thing. I wouldn't worry about it until, like, quite frankly, right before 1940 or after 1940. It's not one of those things you need to take right away, for sure. Yep. Then you have industrial concern. This helps you with your industrial research or electronics research. And then you have your theorist. And your theorist is one of those where you have land theorist, naval theorist, air theorist, and then some other kind of theorist. For instance, you know, Germany has both rocket and nuclear scientist theorists, and these will help you with that research by 15%. And 15% on like nuclear research ends up being a lot.
Yeah, so, because so many days. So 15% bonus would probably. I mean, that just shaves off about. So I guess you're researching 115 faster, so it shaves off about like what 12, 13% of like 1,000 days, which is about 1/3 of a year.
Well, that actually overstacks on your research bonus.
Right, yeah,
from
true.
that
True,
computing
true.
machine stuff too. So 15% could actually perform more like 25 or something percent occasionally, because
Okay.
it's applied later in the mathematical calculation.
Oh, okay.
It's
So
it can
it's
be very, very good.
so when they calculate the bonuses, it's not all in one go, right? So first they calculate, what you get from your tech, and then afterwards they calculate, what you have from what you get from your politics afterwards.
Yeah, it's not like, for instance, 3 plus 4 plus 5. It's more like 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 15. It's more like 3 plus 4 plus 5 in a bracket, and then it calculates that into the number, and then it applies the plus 15 against that number,
Yeah.
in a separate calculation, and you end up with a better performance out of it.
So it's like the times 1.15 of like what
It's just how the
107% instead of 100%. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, again, it usually doesn't perform like 15%. It more performs like a 20 or 25% if you have the right research is done and whatnot. It's more than it appears.
That's actually
But
really
most
cool.
people, when they do this, they pick like a land doctrine or an air doctrine or a naval doctrine. And these land doctrine guys notice that they reduce doctrine research speed.
Yep.
And one really good advantage, look at Heinz Guderian. He has a very specific extra bonus. I'm a max speed plus 10%.
Yep.
And then you look at like Ernst Udet down there with Dive Bomber. He gets close air support, ground attack plus 10%. So, some of these are not the same. They can be have a little bit extra, and Germany is all about a little bit extra.
Yep.
Blitzkrieg Theorist would be honestly what I would go to, simply because of armor max speed. That's absolutely huge. You also get land army XP daily, and we haven't gone over army XP yet because we haven't gotten to the templates yet. But XP is what you use to either lower your doctrine cost. It takes 100, either 100 land to lower land, or 100 air to lower air, or 100 navy to lower navy. But it's also used for playing around with templates,
Yep.
trying to make a better template that does what you need to do.
Yeah.
So picking these up early gives you more to do later, but Germany doesn't always need that. Germany just needs enough, because Germany is like really, really good in like all aspects of research for the most part. You can pick this up early, you can pick up later. I would pick it up before you head into France.
Yep.
But going into military staff at the very bottom, you can assign a chief of staff, a chief of navy, a chief of air force, and then you have military high command. And these are additional advisors.
Would you like go for like organization here? Or attack? Which one's usually better?
I would not do the army drill. And notice they have that parentheses, they have expert next to them.
Mm-hmm.
That there's 3 brackets essentially. There's specialist, expert, and genius. If somebody's a genius, and let's click on somebody, and a good, take a look at Chief of Navy. Notice that you have Eric Reeder. He is a decisive battle, and he's an expert. And then the next guy over is commerce rating, and he's a genius. Notice the genius bonus is a lot more substantial than
20% as opposed to 10%. Right. Okay.
Right. Now, if you're going to be commerce rating, either, especially with subs, that convoy rating efficiency is going to be very, very good for you.
Yeah.
If you're going to make a big surface fleet, you're going to want to have decisive battle.
Mm-hmm.
However, that convoy rating efficiency could also help you, because you can also convoy raid with surface fleets too.
Yeah.
You don't just have to do it with subs. So you can pick whatever you want, in terms of bonuses, but also notice that there's different levels of skill: specialist, expert, and genius. And genius is at the top of that.
Yeah.
Going back to the chief of army, you've got, like I said, you have organization, you have army drill, you have maneuver, and you have army offense. I would recommend either army offense or army maneuver.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking as well. The drills doesn't seem that useful unless because you need to just, pump out divisions really quickly. But this is makes it more effective.
You can also quick deploy divisions too. So
True.
they won't be fully trained, but they learn real quick in combat. So army offense, I mean, you can almost never go wrong with more offense, and then army maneuver with more speed. Again, you can try to encircle troops faster, and
Yep.
when you encircle troops and cut them off from supply, you can just dig in and wait like a month, and then they're really easy to kill. And that's something you definitely want to do, especially as Germany, both on the western front and the eastern front, is try to get some encirclements, because whenever you delete those divisions, you not only you killed the manpower, but you killed that equipment.
Yeah.
And that's a double hit to a country when they lose divisions that way.
Okay.
So both of those would be like one of my options, either offense or maneuver.
Yep.
And again, I wouldn't blame somebody for picking either of them, because they're both good.
Yep.
If you're better at just pushing and not worrying about like encirclements, obviously army offense. If you're trying to do encirclements, maneuver.
Okay.
We went over Navy a little bit. The Air Force, you've got 3 experts, either air, weather, ground, or air experience gain. I would not recommend air experience gain. That's a trap. In my opinion, especially as Germany, once you start World War II, you're going to get oodles of air XP. You do not have to worry about air XP.
Yep.
I would recommend either all weather, which would help you with like rain and thunder and everything, or just flat out just ground support. That air superiority 10%
That's huge.
is actually really huge. So
Yeah.
I would do that, not the all weather. Some other countries, they won't have that ground support. They'll have all weather and something else. It's kind of a coin flip of like what some countries have. Again, Germany's pretty stacked.
Yeah.
In terms of what it has. And then you have
like
the military high command. These last 3, notice they have the all same icon.
Yep.
It's because this list that they show, you can pick any 3 of these, put any of those slots. So the slot on the left is the same as the slot in the middle and the slot on the right. So you can pick any 3 of these. Notice Erwin Rommel, armor, genius, division attack and defense, very, very good.
Yep.
And then you have to decide if you want to do like army logistics for division attrition, or you do want to do like close air support, or you want to do like anti-sub specialist or fleet logistics. I mean, you have to try to figure out like what 3 you're going to pick like long term.
And you don't really change any of these over time.
You could, but like if you're gonna pick something, pick the, right out of the gate, pick the ones that are most beneficial to you. As Germany, it would either be infantry expert or Erwin Rommel's armor genius, because all you need to do is, completed the army innovations to unlock them,
Yep.
which is right at the top of that list. So, in focus trees. So. Again, pick the ones that are most useful for you, and usually focus on the ones that are genius. Some geniuses they may be a genius, but the bonuses they have are not very good. And by that I mean, they may be a genius at like weather, flying. But who cares about weather flying when you get 10% more air superiority?
Pretty much.
So I'll take the air superiority. Again, it's all about what bonuses they have and how substantial that bonus it is, and how it's going to fit into whatever build you're going to do. We've gone over research, focuses, construction. Take a look at the decisions real quick. It's the hammer and the gavel, and it has a 1 on it right now because there's 1 decision that's currently pending.
Oh, okay.
So events and decisions. This is one of those things that you spend political power on.
Yep.
Now, some of these are great. Others are not so much. Germany doesn't have a lot of decisions, and these are kind of mostly the base decisions. One thing to keep in mind is with like improved worker conditions. If you look at that, what it does is it only appears if you have less than 100% stability. Stability has lots of different factors in the game, but the big factors it has is how much consumer goods you're producing. If you'll produce a little bit, you'll also produce a little bit more construction power. Having more stability flat out is good.
Yep.
100 is your goal.
Yep.
After you go to war, you probably won't be at 100. You'll probably be at like 70, maybe 65, depending on the country that you're playing. Because there's penalties for both the defensive and offensive war. Obviously, Germany goes into offensive war. But that improved worker condition can help restore some of that stability.
Yep.
So for 180 days, you get weekly stability 0.5%. So 180 divided by 7, 25 weeks. So you're looking at 12.5% stability for doing improved worker conditions. That's nice, but notice it gives you an additional 5% consumer good factories. So it slows down your construction, and your factory output also goes down by 10%.
Gotcha.
So for half a year, you essentially going to slow down a little bit, but you have to think long-term benefits, more stability.
Yep.
So usually there's not a ton of stuff for like many countries to do here. Germany especially, you're looking at a very select list. But there's other countries that have a lot more of those. Like England has a lot. The USA with the DLC has a lot. Japan with the DLC has a ton of them. So every so often you want to come over here and you want to check out what's going on, because there might be something that benefits you.
Yep.
Production, you've seen the production screen. At the beginning of the game, this is something you kind of want to set up. It's the wrench and the gear. Those green dots, for instance, those are what will pop up in that little number at the gavel. So if you never want to see like when promises of peace is available, you can just unselect that and it will never show.
Okay.
Yeah, production screen. This is all about setting up your country at the beginning of the game, or of course later as you get more factories. So if you're going for a specific build, etc., you can remove some things and add to others. Also, not always, not all the gear is usually listed here. Usually there's a lot of aircraft that you could produce that's not listed.
Yep.
The downside of putting this stuff down is it starts at very, very low efficiency. So if you go to the air screen, for instance, and you put down a Naval Bomber 1, it starts at absolutely dirt efficiency, and it will grow over time. So you can choose to use the equipment that's currently in production, add more military factories to it.
Yep.
Then put down equipment that you'd like to have, and as you make military factories, it will fill into those. So it's what do you need now and what do you need later. That's one of those decisions you kind of make.
Gotcha.
You were already in the plane. You were looking at the planes, and you saw how you could modify the engines, the attacks, the reliability, and the range.
Yep. What's usually best?
This is good and bad. Okay, so here's something to note. I click on fighter and click on the create variant. Engine is always good, always, for fighters. For actually everything, it's usually good, but for fighters, it's especially good. The reason why is because they get more speed and they get more agility. This makes them harder to hit.
And there's no negatives as well, I see.
No negatives at all. Now, when you start doing something else like increasing range, for instance, you actually start reducing the reliability. A little bit of reliability, penalty is not the worst thing ever. A lot can get very bad.
Yep.
But that's why there's the reliability, and so as you increase range and whatnot, you have to also increase reliability to get it back. Now, here's a caveat with fighters: don't increase weapons, because if you reduce all of these to 0, I'll show you why. When you start increasing your weapons, it starts reducing your max speed, your agility, and your reliability.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Even though you can do more damage, it's actually penalizing you.
It's harder. It's harder to do damage.
It's harder to evade. More higher likelihood of breaking. You're not as fast. You're just flat out going to get hit more. And even though you hit harder, you're going to get hit more. They're going to break easier. So with fighters, just don't invest in weapons. Invest in everything but weapons.
Yep.
But if you do something like with tactical bombers, you can actually increase bombing, and you'll get more ground attacks, strategic bombing, and even though you get an agility hit, it's not like you have a lot of agility anyway with
And
tactical
it's not.
bombing.
It's also not the most important thing either.
So yeah, and with tactical bombers, here is what I would recommend.
Yep.
Range. That's about it. Like,
Oh
you
yeah,
invest
true.
you invest in range, and you invest in reliability, and suddenly these things go 3,600 kilometers. And that's it. Like, if you actually increase bombing, if you increase bombing by 1, like, you actually don't get a lot out of it. Like, you got 0.01 ground attack for 1 level of bombing.
That's nothing.
It's nothing. Now, if you go and look at close air support and you increase the attack, you can actually start getting some substantial numbers by increasing it. Again, that's a prerogative, but like every single air unit
That's
is a little bit.
actually a lot more lot bigger.
Yeah, it's more substantial.
Yep, I'm gonna get to chat for a bit. Yeah, thanks for the host, by the way, the Cat Pirate. Appreciate it, mate. And yeah, this is the first time I'm actually looking into HOI4. I have Izlude. He's been watching my co-content, and he's been very generous to help teach HOI4. It's kind of a game that I've kind of wanted to have a look at, but never really got around a chance to because it's quite a complicated game. Really appreciate him putting in time to actually, teach me how to play Hoi, and yeah, really appreciate the host. Also appreciate all the follows that all the follows in the past 2 hours or so. But really, it's Izlude who definitely knows a lot about this game. So yeah, thanks for everyone who's actually tuning in, enjoying what Izlude has to share about this game, and hopefully I'll be able to look into HOI4 a lot more into the future. All right, Izlude, back to you, mate.
It's just introducing concepts and showing people the mechanics. For most of this stuff, like, a lot of it won't permanently stick, but the thing is about going over it is once you stumble into it or you look something up online, like, it should, like, click and come back. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, we went over that.
Yep.
It takes practice, and playing with the interface and everything else for this to really stick. But at least we're just going to go over things and show how some things affect other things. And again, like variance, for instance, here, we're showing how certain stats benefit some planes a lot better than other stats on other planes. Again, fighters have very, very different wants than, like, let's say tactical bombers or CAS. So how you use your air XP, because you use your air XP to modify these, and I wouldn't bother modifying like level 1 planes that much. For instance, I'd probably save up for like 1940 planes or something and make a really good 1940 plane when you roll around with that.
Yep.
That said, as Germany, you might actually have to spend some of your air XP making level 1 fighters just a little bit better, because Germany enters World War II usually with more fighter 1s than fighter 2s. The Allies, they usually enter the war, especially in multiplayer, with a lot of fighter 2s, and so they have a higher quality fighter, but Germany has a lot of quantity.
Yeah.
And as that quantity slowly diminishes, Germany's catching up with 1940 fighters, and eventually Germany's production's the issue. Is like Germany has a huge production power. So do the Allies when it comes to the United States being involved and whatnot. But it's kind of it's a war of production, and it's also a war of quality versus quantity.
Yep.
And how you do that math? It's all instinctual. Like, how many planes do the Allies have? How many planes do I have? What kind of planes do they have? What kind of planes do I have? And then you hopefully win based on your choices and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, this is air XP, and if you look at the tanks are the exact same way. So you can increase main gun, engine, armor, and reliability on tanks as well. And especially as Germany building tanks as you do, either mediums or heavies, I guarantee you'll eventually come to the screen and you will modify these templates for tanks as well. Because making a really strong tank always going to end up having better performance.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna get all this research out of the way, and then afterwards... Oh, I mean, I guess this is still fine for now. And then when that research kicks in, it'll be a lot faster later. And then...
Here's what I'd recommend. Starting out as Germany, I would take one land doctrine for my first research, the second on electronic engineering, and the last on basic machine tools and construction. That's a very vanilla, very stable way to go.
Yep. Then... free military factories. Do I need support equipment? What would military factories best go into? Like fighters or something?
Well, yes, but we can always build more fighters. The thing is, like, if you're going to build something like guns, support equipment, like anything really, the best time to do it is at the start of the game.
Yep.
And you're going to use up a lot of support equipment. I would recommend, as Germany, 3 to 4 on support equipment, because your infantry template, if you're using, we haven't gotten into templates yet, but if you're using the infantry template that it has, it's going to have engineers in it.
Yep.
That uses 30 support equipment per division. And as you attack and defend, you will eventually lose support equipment, and you have to replace it. So as you build more and more divisions and more stuff is in combat, you might even have to even go higher.
Yep.
I find at the beginning of the game, it's better to front load the support equipment, because if you think about it, it is the one piece of equipment in this game that you will never upgrade.
Oh, true.
So,
yeah.
So what you have in 1936 is what you'll have in 1940 and 44, etc., and you don't have to worry about it. But for something like Germany, I would recommend 3 to 4, as like a rule of thumb. Artillery, I wouldn't worry about artillery too much. 1 works fine. Light tank 2s, light tanks aren't super good, but they are good against AI. In multiplayer, I would never worry about light tank 2s. I just delete them.
Yep.
Motorized, you could reduce this down to 1. This gives you some factories to play with. So what you can do is you can put them on, fighters and whatnot. And I would actually recommend going with like 8 factories on fighters, probably 3 on support equipment.
Yep. And then for boats as well. I guess they're working on some of these already.
Okay, so in this production screen, sometimes what people do is they just delete things. They go, I don't care, and they just go delete, 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 delete.
Yep.
And then they put what they want. I personally, I understand that, especially with some things, like sub 1s are not very good. Sub 2s are, even though it says 2, they're not that much better.
But if it's in production, right?
Really
wouldn't you just want to finish it anyway?
Some people do, some people don't. I personally do.
Yeah.
Because I end up using everything. Like, it doesn't matter if sub 1s are technically really, really bad. I can actually, instead of using offensively in the Atlantic, I could use subs like, in the lower Baltic or the upper Baltic seas or the Danish belts, into the east, to the northeast of Germany, for instance.
Yeah.
And that way I could use them to prevent a naval invasion from the Soviet Union. I don't need to I don't need to put them around the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I don't need to put them in the Atlantic. Like, those really bad subs can still serve a purpose closer to home.
Yep.
And I do the same thing if I play like the United Kingdom. United Kingdom starts with a bunch of sub 1s, and what I do is I end up using them in the English Channel and the North Sea and a little bit around the Eastern Med. And that way they still serve a purpose, but I mean, they're not super effective. They just do what they do. But I mean, like, in my opinion, all the equipment's useful in the production screen. And you can, on this production screen, sometimes, like, you don't want to build 2 of these. Like, you're like, well, I already have a production bonus on these, like, early submarine hulls, but why am I building 2 of these? I'll just click on this and build 1 of them each and get them done. And once they're done, they're done. Great, I don't have to worry about them.
Yep.
And then those dockyards go to other things. More importantly, the Scharnhorst class battleships, for instance.
Yep.
And you can always click on these and move them to wherever you want, because if you train your fleets get damaged occasionally through training. You have to repair them. It takes the dockyards at the very bottom of the production list. It repairs the ship and then puts the dockyard back. But it will put the dockyard back starting at the top. So if you wanted to move, let's say again like the Scharnhorst battleships, the Gneisenau now in Scharnhorst to the top, and then assign multiple docks to it. As ships get finished or ships get finished repairing, it will assign those docks to those battleships, and they'll get done sooner.
Yep. Okay.
So that's production. You've got your what are you doing for your national focus, for instance?
Our national focus is going to be the 4-year plan.
It's fine, it's stable.
Yeah.
You might later on you might want to like optimize it a little bit more to like maximize those 100% bonuses, but this is a test. This is just showing you how to do things. We're not worried about super optimized.
Yep.
Your research is set. Notice there's the red icon for unassigned divisions there that's hovering. If you just click on it once, it clicks on individual divisions. If you press and hold shift and then click it, it highlights every single division you have, and then you can take that as they're highlighted and then right click at the bottom on there's 2 officers, one in a slightly bigger panel with a little bit of gold on it. That's the field marshal slot, and then the other side, that's the general slot. Right click on the right hand side and it puts all the divisions in that.
Then I can pick a general.
Yep.
So what do these icons mean here?
So again, like in the very top there, just hold shift and then click on it. Click on the red man, it looks like 3 guys saluting. That'll highlight every single division that you have that hasn't been assigned, and then you can put it into that army, and then you can assign them out. The icons, so these are default icons. You can see a helmet. You can see 3 different tank divisions, and then you have a motorized division. So what you're looking at is leg infantry, some tanks, and then you have motorized, which is just trucks. Trucks are very similar to infantry in terms of their stats. The one stat that they have higher is movement. So if you were trying to fill in like really quick behind like a tank or something like that, not having them attack, just fill in and defend, trucks might be a way to go. Most people don't use them like that. Most people use trucks in the tank division for organization, but some people do make a ton of trucks and they end up doing something like that.
Yep.
And then you have like cavalry, which is the horse icon, and you can change these icons at any time, by the way. So while you're here, if you look at the very top and on those gold buttons on the upper left, there looks like a tank icon. Yes, the recruit and deploy. Here is where your templates are, and if you click on one of them, take the infantry for instance. Just click on edit on the infantry dash division. Now, this shows you all the stats that you currently have from doctrines and currently researched equipment. So if someone gives you 1939 guns, these stats don't change.
Yep.
Once you research 1939 guns, these stats will change, because these stats are based on the assumption that you have full equipment. Now, at the very bottom of the combat stats, you see that thing says combat with 18?
Combat with 18.
So, combat with.
Oh yeah, that one. Yep.
This is something that, like, again, Paradox doesn't do a very good job at explaining. Whenever you're fighting, tile to tile, you versus the enemy or the enemy versus you. So whenever they attack, there's up to 80 combat width to attack you. And Then if they open up another front, like say like on an adjacent tile, they open up an additional 40, I believe. Maybe it's 20. I don't remember. But the point is, you want to keep around
Oh, okay.
very even combat widths, which means the rule of thumb is 10, 20, 40. And the reason why is because mathematically, 2 20s equal a 40. 140, that's a 40. 4 10s, that equals a 40. Simple as that. It's just having weird combat widths like 18, 16, 21, 24, like those don't go very well into the combat system compared
Right.
to just making the division right.
So if I do
Now,
something like this, right? What's the difference between like deep or what's the difference?
so this is exactly what I was going to go into. Now, first off, I want you to look at what's, look at the division that says support on the left-hand side.
Yep.
These do not affect combat width. They do affect stats. So having a support, if you just hover over the support artillery, it shows you what it does to the division. It gives you more defense, more breakthrough, more soft attack, more hard attack, but it also has a couple negatives here. But those little bits of negatives are far outweighed by the positives of having support artillery.
Yep.
So that ends up being a very, very, very big bonus. Same thing with engineers. The engineering company gives you more defense, etc., etc., etc. Again, the bonuses for this, and it gives you a different assaults over forts, rivers, amphibious, forests, hills, jungle, etc. Like this is a very, very good thing
good,
to have.
yeah.
Yeah, these are two that I would, for a heavy production country like Germany, United States, Soviet Union, England can go back and forth on this because their production is usually very stretched. But I would suggest for a high production country, like these are the two best support companies you can give a 20 width infantry division.
Yeah.
I say 20 width. 40 width you might want to add a little bit more because you're looking at a more high performance division. But we're going to focus pretty much on 20s for now.
Yep.
Because you can play the game single player with 20 widths, no problem. Multiplayer, you're going to have a combination of 20 and 40 width, depending on what kind of rule sets you use. But for pushing divisions, a good rule of thumb is 40 width is better for on the offense, 20 width is better on the defense.
Okay.
Now, I see what you did with your divisions here. So you just made your combat with 20. Now, this is using a bunch of rifles. I'm going to show you something different you can do.
Yep.
Now, notice, let me take a pic, I'll take a screenshot of you. Your stats here, done, okay. Now what I want you to do is I want you to go in here and I want you to change 3 of those helmets, which are infantry, to artillery icons. So you're going to have to delete 1 and then change 2. And just click on remove for like one of those. No, you just want 2. You just
Okay.
want 2. Yeah, just switch one of those 3 artillery to a infantry.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because this way you're going to be at 20 combat width, which will fit into the. Looks like you need that. You do have one back. Perfect. And I'm probably delayed from you.
Yeah. That's what's going on.
Yeah. So you're at 20 combat width, but I've got a screenshot of your 20 combat width with just rifles.
Mm-hmm.
Your soft attack used to be 78. Now it's 110.
Oh wow. Okay.
So, and your breakthrough used to be 38. It's 41 now.
Yep.
Your defense went down. It went down a lot. But the thing is, quite frankly, that's fine.
Yep.
Because even when they're attacking you, your defense is kind of like your evasion. It kind of goes back and forth between breakthrough and their attacks and whatnot. But since your soft attack is so much better, you're going to be counterattacking a lot better. So this is more of a higher production value. If you look at you see in the bottom right-hand corner of that, it says
719 to 769, yeah.
It used to be 596 to 667, so it basically went up by about 100. But you're getting a lot more performance now.
Yep.
You're also using more manpower. Notice your manpower actually went down. Your manpower in my screenshot is 10,600. Now it's 8,600.
Right.
And that means you're saving 2,000 manpower,
which can go into other divisions.
Which goes into other divisions, exactly. So
okay.
you have a higher quality unit, but you have to take into things effect. And here's what I'm going to talk strategy here with you real quick.
Yeah.
So here's something to consider. What you can do in the early game is make a bunch of rifle divisions that are 20 width. Just make a bunch of rifles. And then when you research Artillery 2 in late 1938 to 1939, you can put Artillery 2 into production,
yep,
change the template, and then you can start slowly changing these out to that new template. And that way you have the divisions on the field, they're still effective, but you start switching to a higher quality template later on. Because Artillery 1 is very good for support artillery,
yep,
but Artillery 2 blows Artillery 1 completely out of the water in terms of performance, especially as line artillery, which is line artillery is on the right side, support artillery is on that left side column. So again, one of the strategies is you can wait to research Artillery 2, and then what you do is instead of having like one military factory on it, you start putting 10 to 15 on it.
Right.
And then you produce it really, really fast, and you start changing that template out like every 10 days or so. You're changing a template or two around,
yep,
and that equipment fills in. You get a little bit of guns back, you get a little bit of manpower back, and as you are conquering through as Germany, you will have to use those guns as garrisons,
yep,
to hold down territory. It's not as bad as it doesn't use that many guns for the most part, but you'll still want to be making new divisions as well. So you'll be able to recycle those guns into new divisions. But again, that's more of an advanced strategy. Like starting 7-2, in my opinion, it looks really good, but it can be even better later if you just wait and you just switch something around for the most part with divisions.
Yep.
So again, like play strategies, etc. Can totally go over that later. But like let's take a look at your divisions. Make sure to assign some of those divisions to a general, and we're going to talk about front lines and battle plans.
Yep. So I've got 26 assigned to all the divisions in Germany, pretty much, and I've assigned the other 4 into Prussia, East Prussia.
Okay. So with generals, starting generals can only take 24. Once you click on a general and you assign a general, it'll actually show you that he's actually going to be over committed in terms of troops.
Okay. So we'll assign those 2 into a general.
24 on one, 6 on another. And generals can have more than one front line. So click on one of those generals,
yep,
and you'll notice right next to what looks like it's the paradrop order, but right next to the parachute, there's front line. Now you can draw a front line, like just click on Poland, like the west end of Poland, and it will put a front line across the entire thing. Now it doesn't matter if you have 1 or like let's say 100 troops, it'll draw the entire front line across that.
Yep.
If you want to be more conservative, you can use the right mouse button and you can drag it across until you find out how far you want that front line to be.
Okay. So something like that, pretty much. And
Something like
I
that.
guess
I
that
mean,
would be used. That'll be more handy if you had multiple generals over an entire front line or something.
right, and so that goes into the field marshal because it'll actually color code that light blue differently depending on what front lines you use, what generals you're using, what front lines you're using, etc. And so you can kind of keep track of these troops belong to this general, these troops belong to this other general. And if you're invading Poland, you're probably going to be doing it with at least 48 plus divisions, most likely, in 1939. Like we're still in 1926. So you've got a lot of growth in terms of what you're going to be doing to your military. But for fighting Poland, you're probably going to have at least 48 on the western front of it.
Yeah.
And we'll probably have 12 or so in that northern area. Umland Masuren or whatever it is. Basically Königsberg. But you'll definitely have more than this. Now, the other thing I want you to show. Then you go ahead and just pick a general. It doesn't matter. We'll go over to generals in a little bit.
Yep.
So, while you have all these units selected, the other thing I do is right next to that frontline button, you see that there is an offensive line. Now, this is important because I want you to not click on that. I want you to just hit. We're just going to let things roll. All right. We're just going to let time roll. Just hit the space bar and it unpauses the game, and then hit the plus key a couple of times to get to like 3 or 4 speed, and all the units are going to start moving. And the reason I want to show you this is I want you to see how they get on the front line, and then I'm going to show you a stat.
Yep, let me know when to stop.
Well, let me know when they get to the front line for like 5 or 6 seconds. Okay, go ahead and pause. Go ahead and hit space. Now, what I want to show you is notice that next to the division name, they have this blue bar that's slowly filling up. If you hover over that, it says that this unit is entrenched.
Which one?
Where's
the blue bar?
You other general. I saw them when they were moving.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you destroyed it because you started training. I don't know. Click on Heinz Guderian. Yeah, you got the guy on the left. Heinz Guderian.
Yep.
So notice those little blue bars that are starting to appear next to their names? Not Rommel.
Those names?
Yep.
These names? Entrench.
Yep,
oh, right. Okay, yeah, I see it. It's not red. It's not blue for me.
Light blue?
Light blue is light. Okay, so the entrench is orange for me. Light blue is something else.
I mean, if you hover over the division names on the left, like you can see it on the panel.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. I get you.
Yeah. You can see the percentage of entrenchment, and if you hover over it, it'll say this unit is entrenched. This receives a whatever percent, max, whatever, defensive combat bonus. It'll increase by 2% each day. Max entrenchment will be reached in X amount of days.
Yep.
So this is really good for infantry because infantry by default will dig in, and they'll be defensive. Now, the other side of this coin is now that you have all these selected, down there on the battle plans, what I want you to do is there is a offensive line that you can click on. Why isn't yours highlightable? Oh, it's because that's why. It's because these are on the front line. That's why.
These guys are on the front line?
Go ahead and they're not assigned to a front line. Go ahead and click on Erwin Rommel.
Yep.
And you'll notice that since he has a front line, his offensive line, which is right next to that front line button, is clickable. Yeah, it's a little bit golden. Now, click on that, and then just right-click somewhere in Poland, and you can actually drag like a line if you want, with like a magic marker. So go ahead and just drag that offensive line.
Right, I see.
So what this does is if you're at war and you hit the arrow button on Erwin Rommel, this is what their divisions are going to try to take. If you're just auto battle planning, this is your goals. And so what you can try to do is you can try to avoid certain things, like only go up to the river, don't try to cross the river. I'll do that myself. But also what it does, go ahead and like unpause the game. You'll start seeing another piece of the planning bonus when you unpause, because you'll see both entrenchment on Erwin Rommel, but you'll also see what's called planning bonus.
Okay, so what do I see? Planning bonus?
Click on Erwin Rommel. I don't see him clicked yet.
Oh, planning speed 30%.
Yeah. That planning bonus. Go ahead and pause again. It's the preparation attack bonus up to whatever it is, and so that extra bonus, if you're trying to like push through like a really dug-in spot, you can build up a planning bonus and then assault it.
Yep.
The thing is, every day you lose a little bit more planning bonus when you're attacking. So it's one of those things, like, especially if you're battle plan attacking, where it's like, hey, I want you, AI, take this for me, go. It will be conservative. It will save up some planning bonus. It will attack. It will stop. It will attack. It will stop. If you're like trying to micro and be on the super offensive or whatever, you probably won't save up tons of attack bonus. Now, what this is really good for is, again, is assaulting very, very hard to take areas.
Yep.
Examples of that: forts, heavy stacks of divisions, going over rivers. If you're having problems getting over, build up attack bonus. Try to go across. Some rivers are bigger than others. Like you can see in Poland, there's small rivers and there's this giant river. You can also see it in in Germany. Going across the Rhine, for instance, that's a major river.
Yep.
Hamburg, that's a major river. They have a much. There's no way to tell, unfortunately, on the map. They never did that, but there's a different bonus for like heavy big rivers compared to normal rivers, and unfortunately you just can't tell which is which. You can only tell visually which is which. But if you're having problems going over it, build up a planning bonus, then go over it.
Yep.
Or go around it, because some rivers, like the farther you go, it becomes a smaller river, and you can ford the small side of the river, and once you're over the river, then you can start pushing like normally again.
Gotcha.
So Navy stuff. Navy, we can go into it real quick because, quite frankly, you just have like two groups, and you could pile all the Navy into this for like an example, but we'll make it really, really simple. Just go ahead and click on the Navy and click on. You could assign an admiral if you want, but Navy really comes down to: are you trying to find something? Are you trying to defend against something?
Yep.
Or are you trying to escort something? And the other options are kind of DLC-ish. You don't even have those options really, which are mines, because you can put mines or remove mines depending on if you have mine-sweeping technology, which you're playing the vanilla game, you don't have that. So the only other option is Strike Force, and Strike Force is a really good example of, I have this fleet, they sit at port, and they wait for somebody to find something. And the moment something's found or engaged, they take off like a rocket out of the port, and they go to deal with it. And then afterwards, they go right back to port, and they wait again.
Yep.
And the reason why is because a fleet at port isn't using fuel.
Okay.
Whereas a fleet that's trying to find something, convoy defend, convoy raid, whatever, those end up using that. So if you just, if you merge these fleets, and you can merge all this stuff with just clicking on it and then right clicking on the other icon, you can merge all these fleets. But for the most part, I just want you to click on one of these panels, and then what you're going to do is just click on, let's say, like patrol in the eastern North Sea, and you'll see that it turns red for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it goes to yellow and then green, and that means it's doing something.
Yeah.
And if you hover over that panel, it'll actually tell you what your supremacy value is compared to the enemy supremacy value.
Okay, so wait,
Which is
sorry,
really...
where do I see that? I don't see it right now.
Well, you're both, okay, yeah, go ahead and click on patrol, click on eastern North Sea. Right click on it. See, not Denmark.
Oh, so it's like red or something.
Yep. And then go ahead and unpause it. Oh, yeah, sorry, you already are unpaused.
It's interesting they use... I thought they'd have to use coal for the ships, but anyway.
It's all oil at this point in time.
Right, yeah.
Coal was like the mid 1800s or so. Coal and steam, but here you can see the fuel. You see the fuel usage. But if you hover over the North Sea, you see what your friendly supremacy value is, and this lets you know what's my combat value in terms of like a rough weight of an offense defense.
Yep.
And then if the enemy comes in, it will give you what's the combat value, and you always, of course, want to be above the enemy. And so if this turns yellow or red, you immediately want to pause, or in multiplayer, immediately just stop contesting the area.
Yep.
Because you don't want to get into a fight that you might not win. Simple as that.
Okay.
There are times where you will beat a fleet, even though it was a Red Sea, because your fleet composition was just that good. Big ships like heavy cruisers and battle cruisers and battleships and carriers, they do have they have a much higher weight. But again, if someone brings in a really bad fleet comp, like, don't bring 20 destroyers to try to kill one battleship and a few cruisers and a carrier. Like, depending on what the weights are. Like, again, I see a lot of people in multiplayer, they try to do destroyer spam, and I will almost always beat them with a proper fleet composition than just destroyer spam. It's because destroyers are very, very weak when it gets down to it.
Yeah.
They're very easy to one-shot. And so as you shoot and you destroy these things, they don't come back. And if you have a really good fleet composition, you can outlast them long enough that their offense curve all of a sudden tanks.
Last thing here, how do you increase the fuel consumption? Is it just building a fuel silo or something?
So a fuel silo increases your capacity for fuel.
Yep.
To get more fuel, that takes oil. So, and this is a newer concept. That it used to be that oil was used for building things. It wasn't used for things doing their thing, either tanks, trucks, planes, navy. So if you go to the production screen, then click on the oil icon in the upper left, what you have to do is you have to buy oil from a country.
Yep. But I guess at the same time, if you're full on oil, then there's not really much point buying oil as well.
Exactly. So
it's only worthwhile.
Go ahead and hit pause real quick, and I'm going to show you one thing we kind of skipped over in the industry screen. So go back to the file industry tab. Notice how there is fuel refining.
Yep.
So each level of fuel refining, and it's an expensive research for sure, especially since you can only see 37. You're seeing the fuel refining for a year ahead, but that is a 255-day cost. to research the next level of fuel refining.
Oh, right,
Except for the
research.
fact that,
Okay.
except for the fact that like it, you know, is a year ahead, so it's more expensive to research.
Yep.
Now, every one of these is 20% more fuel gain per oil. You also get more fuel gain for refineries. So this is the question for Germany is, do I need to buy oil or do I want to do like oil processing and make my own processed oil from refineries? You honestly don't get a lot of oil from fuel refineries, but it is a constant drip of oil into your fuel.
And at the
Also
same time, you
synthetic
need rubber as well.
Exactly, same time you get rubber. But notice the cost. It's $14.50 per synthetic. That's even more than a civilian factory.
Yep.
Um, Now, because of that, high infrastructure, like that 70, 80 level infrastructure, is going to be even more important for that because it will help you build these really, really fast if you end up going really heavy in synthetics.
Yep.
Germany almost always has to, spam out a bunch of synthetics.
Yep.
Not because of the oil, but definitely because of the
For the
rubber.
rubber, yeah, because all the other rubber that you can get is all the way over here, and when your convoys start getting attacked by the UK, if you're at war, it's not so easy to get rubber at that point.
Yeah, all the UK has to do to like convoy raid you is they just have to convoy raid whoever you buy, convoy raid around whoever you're buying it from.
Yep.
It's either that or put it around like the South African Horn, the Argentina, Horn down there, and then maybe like the Caribbean, and all of a sudden like no matter where like you're buying your rubber from, it's getting convoy raided.
Yep.
No way around that. It's just it is what it is. So Germany definitely has to try to become self-sufficient
In
on
rubber.
rubber,
Yep.
let alone oil, real quick. And they do have a focus that actually adds to rubber to your synthetic refinery outputs. So you can actually get a lot of rubber as
Oh, synthetic
Germany.
rubber, there you go.
Yeah, it's a lot. They can get a lot of rubber for the
Coal
aircraft
liquidization
production.
as well. And you get a
Yes.
free refinery that way. Ooh,
Yep.
300% research bonus for synthetic resources. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but you might want to consider doing that in 1939 or beyond, and the reason why is because you could trade for synthetic, you could trade for rubber
Until
with
then.
someone like until the Dutch East Indies, and then in 1939, what you can do is start popping out those synthetic factories.
Yep.
And as you switch over to synthetic rubber, then you start purchasing less and less actual rubber until the point you don't buy any anymore, and you essentially recoup those civilian factories. So it's one of those things: buy later and then buy nothing later on, but you still have an oil problem.
Yep.
Now, in Europe, there's basically two places in the European sphere area, kind of three actually. Romania, the Caucasus in the Soviet Union, and depending on
Baku, right here.
the game, sometimes northern Africa and Libya has a little bit of oil, but it's not a lot.
Yeah, but before they actually went around and went try to look for oil, Saudi doesn't have much oil themselves because no one knows that there's oil there at that time.
Well, actually, they knew there was oil, but the thing is, we couldn't do deep drilling back then.
Okay.
Because it was 1930.
Yeah.
They didn't start doing deep drilling until 55. So yeah, like there was still oil in Iraq, and Germany wanted to get to Iraq for the oil. There was a little bit of like light drilling that was done, but and Germany was definitely hard up on the oil problem with flying all their planes, let alone their tanks, etc. They definitely had fuel issues. Romania was their lifeblood essentially.
Pretty much, yeah.
The Allies bombed it a lot.
Yeah. Once the Germans lost Romania in 44, it was basically lights out for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Japan has a similar problem in this game.
Yeah.
Japan likes to have a nice big air force, as big as it can get, they like to have a really big navy, and the problem is they don't really have the fuel for it.
So you've got 4
What they
fuel
have to
here.
do,
Yep.
well, what Japan needs to do is, early game is you buy fuel from like Venezuela,
Hmm.
because it won't affect the Allies at all. You can buy it from Venezuela because they have a ton of oil, and that's how you fly your air force. But then later on, when Japan goes on the offensive, you're looking at gaining oil from taking Singapore and Indonesia and everything else down that way. And that's how they get their actual oil reserves.
16s, 6s, 16s.
Yeah, that's how you keep things like flying and floating as
15.
Japan.
Yeah,
Like,
gotcha.
you got to be you have to go right out of the gate for that traditional like World War II push in Singapore and Indonesia, because the sooner you get those resources, the sooner you can pull back on buying that fuel. And especially when the United States gets involved, you definitely want to stop buying from Venezuela, and instead you have to, even though it's going to hurt Germany a little bit, but you can buy oil from the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union is right next door.
Yep. And you're not fighting the Soviet Union at the same time as Japan.
Exactly. Yeah. You in multiplayer you never should. It's usually against the rules. But we've pretty much gone over, like, for the most part, like all the concepts except for air. We never really got into air.
We can go through that really quickly, and we'll just make it, I guess, say complete for beginner's guide, and then I think after that, we should wrap it up.
Pretty much. Everything else will be like templates, because we went over the infantry template. We didn't really go over the tank templates.
Yep.
But that's stuff that you can look up in your spare time, and you can always do the 1939 start and just do combat after combat. You can do 1936 starts, and you can just work on, here's my build, how did it work for me type things. But air stuff is pretty easy for the most part.
Yep.
I've already clicked on it, and these are fighters with a little bit of like tactical bombers and whatnot. So you have these multitude of buttons. The most important ones are air superiority, close air support, and interception, and they're all on the far left. Now, you always, fighters, they should just always be on air superiority as default.
Yep.
And there's what's called air zones, and air zones are usually multiple states. So building, like when you're building in civilian and military factories, those are states. Air zones are usually multiple states, so like Eastern Germany, Western Germany, Northwest Germany. There's basically three air zones in that area of Germany. Again, air superiority, fighters will try to fight fighters.
Yep.
Close air support, that's where your CAS or your tactical bombers help your infantry units or tank units if they're in combat, whether there's offensive or defense. And then interception is having fighters or heavy fighters go after close air support, naval bombers, tactical bombers. And if you have green air, you should, and if you don't have heavy fighters, you should probably go, okay, I've got green air, let me like peel off like one wing or two wings and put them on interception instead.
Yep.
Because that way you can start shooting down and interrupting their close air support. Because if you're winning the air war with green air, like, you might as well start shooting down the other stuff too.
Yep.
Because that other stuff also provides a little bit of air value, and it will really affect their combat value for their units as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we've been over a lot of things. We've been over a lot of stuff. For now, it's pretty much you've got a lot of basic-y things. You just have to work on playing the game and trying to remember what we went over. Because trust me, like, you're gonna get frustrated. The interface isn't the best for like being a friendly interface, but the more you play it and the more you figure it out, the better it's gonna be. You just have to learn to fail gracefully.
Pretty much.
Go into a test build, play around with it, try something, and then go, well, I learned something there. And I mean, I've been playing this game for like 4 years. I'm still learning things.
Okay. Yeah, because like when I first tried it, like I tried doing it myself, went through the tutorial, and yeah, I found it quite an overwhelming experience, but I think now that you've broken it down for me, it's a lot less scary than it was. It felt like too much to manage to, okay, maybe it's doable now. And we gotta play and try and see what happens.
It just doesn't have a help system.
No.
And so much has changed also that like, you know, it's much more stable now than it used to be in terms of like balance of things. There's still some things that are out of balance,
Yep.
but they've definitely been working on trying to balance everything out. But it's a good game. It's just its tutorial is like the worst tutorial I have ever seen in a game. It's really bad. Like it tells you, for instance, on that front line, click on the highlighted front line button. And I stared at the screen. Where's this front line button you're talking about? It highlighted it with 1 pixel. And at 1440p resolution, 1 pixel.
You're not gonna
nothing.
see it at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was nothing. Like it should have flashed or something like that. But I sat there staring at the screen going, what are you talking about? Like, what? And so I had to go to YouTube, and there were tons of guides on YouTube that slowly broke things down.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned how to learn. And I've kind of condensed a lot of stuff real quick in just 2.5 hours for you.
Yeah, it's actually been
But-
about 3 hours now, but yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
actually
but I
been
mean,
awesome though. Like
Yeah,
that's
but
how
like-
crazy deep this game is because it's taken 3 hours to get through all of the basics,
Right.
and there's even
But, like-
more that's to come as well.
But before we wrap up and finish, like, you see that, like, the factory count that you have, 68 factories, you're buying one with rubber.
Yeah.
This is 1936. When I go to war in 1939, that for me is going to read like 280.
Ooh, okay. More factories everywhere.
And the reason is factory growth. I go into civilian factories early.
Yeah.
I build a lot of civs, and then I go really heavy into mills and docks, and then I just pump out the equipment that I need. And even while I'm taking Poland, I'm actually filling in some of my equipment that I need.
Gotcha.
And then after Poland falls, then I go west.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at a lot of factory buildup, and then I go really heavy into my mills, and then it produces again the equipment that I need. Because some equipment that I need, like I roll over time, like fighters. If I do medium tanks in single player, I'll put some mills on that because a little bit of efficiency growth at the beginning of the game pays off a lot later on.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing heavy tanks, I mean that takes until like mid to late 1938 for me to finish like a rushed heavy 2, which is 1941 heavy tanks. So I don't even need to worry about mills for those until 38.
Yep.
So again, some things you do early, again, economy, which is civs, and then you get to a point where you don't worry about civs again. Germany, in my opinion, once you stop building civs, you won't build civs again. Because
you just need all that
whenever you
military production pretty much.
well, yes, because whenever you conquer a country, you're going to get those civs and mills.
Yeah.
And those civs end up feeding you. Those mills feed you.
Oh, that's true.
So-
That as well, yeah.
Yeah, so you get to a point where you have all these civs and you have all these construction lines, and you don't need to worry about your civ production anymore. Other countries, like a perfect example is actually either England or Japan. You go through these periods of I build civs, I build mills, I build civs, I build mills, I build civs, I build mills, because you're fighting the math all the time, where you build too many like military factories. Then you got to go build a few more civs to counter that problem and to get your construction back up, and then you go back to building mills again. Japan especially has that problem.
Yeah.
But England kind of has this problem where England's job, especially in multiplayer, is to win the air war. That is that Navy is their job, and it means they're researching air. They're building mills, they're putting it on air, they have to have a little bit of a land army too. They've got to have about 72 divisions total. And that's because they need to hold both England and North Africa in 1939, 1940. and so they have to do kind of both roles at the same time.
Yeah.
So they end up doing like civs and mills and a little bit more civs, and they go really heavy in mills. And then because the USA player usually ends up trading aluminum, they end up buying the aluminum from England. England usually like just saves those civs and just keeps on building mills to build more planes. It's just certain countries perform differently, and how they react to the situation will always play differently.
Yeah.
But like for Germany, when you go to war in World War II in 1939, I mean, you're easily going to have like 192 divisions, most likely, and that's infantry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not even tanks, that's just infantry. Because you're going to have 72 or so for the Eastern Front. You're going to have over 72 for the Western Front. And you'll have a couple like groups of 24 to fill in later on whenever you need. But you're going to need a lot of infantry to hold down like both fronts at the same time.
Yeah.
And then, especially when you go to the full Eastern Front with the Soviets, I mean, you're going to need 300 plus, probably 400 for the most part for all that. Like, it gets spicy sometimes, especially in multiplayer on the Eastern Front. There's definitely loud words thrown back and forth occasionally.
All right. Yeah, thanks for the intro. I really appreciate it, mate. I know it's a lot of time that you put into this. Would you like me to make this available on YouTube a bit later? Like, I'll just take the VOD and upload it.
That's completely fine. I don't mind.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, and
yeah.
don't be afraid to reach out. Ask a question, etc. And definitely don't be afraid of doing test builds, even on Twitch or whatever. Like I see people do them all the time.
Yeah.
Tons of single player going on, not just multiplayer.
Okay.
But it's just about playing the game, getting comfortable with it. Germany is in a great spot in the game because they're in the driver's seat in terms of like what happens.
Yep.
I would not recommend doing an advanced country like Japan. Japan is really hard to play because they do everything, and their economy is. I mean, I can walk you through the economy, but it kind of takes a little bit of under the hood knowledge, because with Japan you have to kind of press every button that gives you a bonus to make it work really well. And it's not easy to do because like Japan's biggest problem is completely a lack of tanks. It's a combination of economy, oil, and no tanks.
Yeah.
Because very few Japan players end up making tanks because they just don't have the research time because they're doing everything.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And also they have a lot less resources than Europe does.
Yep.
So Japan is always starving for steel, for instance. They have a very, very different build compared to all the other major powers, especially when they fight the USA. Like the USA, especially if you get the DLC, like Man the Guns, you look at the USA is an absolute beast. There's a reason why they called it the Sleeping Giant.
Yep.
It is a beast.
So, Staray's asking in chat, how's China? Playing as China.
China's fine to play. It's better to play in the DLCs. Waking the Tiger was like the third expansion, I think. And Waking the Tiger brought some bonuses to Germany, Japan, and China, because there's a lot of different Chinese countries. Guangxi Click, China, Communist China, Shaanxi, Manchukuo. All these are specialized like trees in the Waking the Tiger DLC. A player China can really put the hurt on a Japanese AI, let alone a Japanese player. There's a reason why usually China is banned in multiplayer if it's like a historical multiplayer game, because currently they can just do too much damage to Japan. Like it's debilitatingly bad. But especially in single player, China plays completely fine. And it's depending on what China you want to play, because you could play any of those Chinas and have a good game. Usually it ends up being either nationalist China, communist China, or Manchukuo.
Yeah.
because Manchukuo, it was the puppet
Japanese
of
puppet state, yeah.
Japanese puppet state, but also it was the previous emperor of Japan, not sorry,
Emperor of
previous
China, Hui.
emperor of China that was living up there, and he was the figurehead. So
Yep.
you could play a alternate historical game where you break away from Japan and you try to retake all of China. So
Mm.
I'm gonna completely disagree with you. VQB, a player China versus a player Japan is not fun for everyone. That's Japan has enough problems as it is with like its equipment and production and everything else, and trying to fight in micro against China for like 2 or 3 years before like fighting the United States. There's reasons why China is usually not allowed anymore against a Japan player, because
Yep.
the China situation is bad enough as it is. Trying to fight through, I mean, that's a lot of China to fight through as Japan. But yeah, I mean, different countries perform differently, and now, China's not OP. It's just when you have a player China fights Japan very differently than the AI, and they usually fight it much more competently.
Yep.
Yeah, VQB. Yeah, but the thing is, you use the usually take on China for a multiplayer game. Japan has to like deal with China, and then they have to deal with like 6 other people, plus like a Canadian air controller with a ridiculous amount of airplanes. Like, it's just having a player China really puts the crimp on Japan. Like, it makes it really unnecessarily hard. Because again, there's a lot of China to fight through, especially with all the other pieces of China coming in and helping out. Because the moment China actually has an actual player, you know, the situation has changed.
Yep.
Yeah, but VQB, like, the United States can knock out, Japan with a long-range naval invasion from Los Angeles. Like, they do a long-range naval invasion, and Japan isn't prepared for it correctly in terms of naval supremacy. You can land 12 tanks in Yokohama and just walk into Tokyo. So, and then all of a sudden Japan just falls.
Jap can't take on China, the US wouldn't even go in.
Yeah, but like, just don't have a Chinese player. That's what I'm saying. Like, it really, like, making a Chinese player, have Japan fight a Chinese player for hours, you know, while bleeding manpower and equipment, etc. Like in a historical multiplayer game is just, and then like your prize for doing it is now you get to fight the United States. Like, that's a little much.
Yeah. I suppose the better players would be able to do it, but that's far from where I am right now. So, yeah.
Even then it's fatiguing because you're microing along this long. You've got a micro along this long border. You're worried about your naval build. You're worried about production. You're worried about resources. You're worried about your researches. You're worried about your decisions. Oh, did I look at my air superiority? Oh shoot, I haven't had air superiority there for like 10 minutes. Oops. Like, it's a lot to take in for like a Japan player versus China, especially a China player, not an AI. Like, it's just, there's a lot of China to grind through. It really doesn't need a player on China.
Yep.
It's like having a player on Poland. Like, if a player on Poland, if they build up Poland right, makes Poland kind of bad for Germany for 39. There's a reason why they don't let Poland, have a player for that. France is different. They have, debilitating debuffs that end up messing up with France. But if you prepare right with Poland, you can prolong that for another couple months, and that ends up really messing with Germany players a little bit. It makes them very not happy. As you can see, whereas like multiplayer is like a definite thing, and it becomes a very, for the most part, world war when you're doing a multiplayer, because when you have you know England, France, Spain, Germany, Italy, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Soviet, Manchukuo, Japan, British Raj, South Africa, Australia, USA. Let's never talk about New Zealand, but when you have all those countries like playing, like it's Canada, it becomes a real fight in terms of Team A and Team B, and it's really fun, but you definitely have to train up for it. And the reason why I say kind of ignore New Zealand is because New Zealand players usually end up, and I hate saying it for those New Zealand players in the channel. I personally think there shouldn't be a Finland player. I mean, if there's a Finland player, there better be like at least 2 people on the Soviets, because that's too many people to micro against when you're looking at like 4 or 5 people plus an air controller versus the Soviets. That's a little much.
Yeah.
New Zealand as a country in this game doesn't have a lot of population, and that manpower ends up kind of controlling like what New Zealand can do, because the more combat New Zealand gets in, the less manpower they end up having. So New Zealand has good focuses in the game, in the Together for Victory DLC. But their manpower is their stopping block. But New Zealand can kind of do everything. Like they can do, Marine Special Forces. They can do tanks. They could do Navy. I find a lot of New Zealand players end up doing a lot of subs for the Allies, and so New Zealand ends up being the sub guy for like countering the Axis, especially in the Pacific against Japan. New Zealand, unfortunately, just doesn't have the population to do what it needs to do. And usually in mods they fix that because they give them extra recruitable pop. But for the vanilla game, New Zealand is a very small little 2-island nation that just doesn't have the population to do what it needs to do.
Alright then, I think we're gonna wrap up the stream now, but yeah, we've been here for a while and I'm starving a bit now. But yeah, Izlude, thanks so much for like popping on and giving me the ropes when it comes to Hearts of Iron. I never really had much of a clue as to how to play this game until you went through it, and now a lot of these features, they make a lot more sense than they did when I was trying to play it years ago and eventually just gave up. Yeah, and if you're up for like more, I guess, Hearts of Iron coaching or even the Code 2 game, I'm more than happy for you to hop on.
Yeah, no, we could do more coaching. We could do a test game. One last thing I'm going to talk about.
Yeah,
this is very definitely the last thing. There's one thing we didn't go over, and that is license. What you can do is, if you look at a country and you right-click on them, you go to the Diplomacy tab. What you can do is you can request to view their licenses. And
license?
Yes, license production. And what license production is what you can do is you can try to purchase.
That's like Intel.
Well, what it is it's, say like here's a good example, and it works better for the Allies than the Axis for this. A great example, Australia. Say you want to make an Australia and you want to make like some kind of like a tank build or a Navy build or something. The England player can allow you to purchase those licenses. By default, the AI, when you're playing single player, they will not let you license 1936 technology. They'll just say no. But if it's like 1922, like old technology, they'll be like, okay, sure. But new stuff, they don't let you do it. But in multiplayer, what you can do is say like, okay, I want to license converted hull aircraft carriers.
Yep.
And what happens is you can either build that off the license, or it gives you a 20% research bonus to that.
Is that in base
So
game?
it's in the base game.
Okay.
I think it's in the base game. Maybe not. I guess not. I guess it's something they added later on together for victory. Well, one day when you buy like DLCs, and I would recommend buying DLCs when they're on sale.
Yep.
Which happens a lot with Paradox. Because
Yeah.
they do 50% off sales.
How much are the DLCs normally? Because, you know, that's the thing. Currently, I'm kind of working, and I don't really have anywhere to spend my money. Lucky me. So, you know, there's that.
In the 20ish range each, but you know, there's like 4 or 5 DLCs, 6 DLCs now.
Yep.
And so if you get them 50% off, you can get them in a really nice bundle.
Oh, yeah. So I might just wait till Christmas for that, or maybe if a Humble Bundle comes out with Hearts of Iron for, like, DLCs or something.
Yeah, I mean, again, they do it a lot. Like every 3 or 4 months, there's usually a sale. So,
Okay.
Same thing with like Stellaris and whatnot. They do it on Stellaris all the time too.
Yeah.
But again, with the license, you can either, you know, when you get the DLCs and you can do licenses, you can either produce it from that license, or you can use it to, and I should say, use it to do your own research. And the reason why you do your own research on it is, yes, you still have to research it, but you do research it faster. And because you're researching it yourself, you can apply a design company to that. So again, as an example of Australia, say you're doing, again, the carriers, if you have the Pacific Fleet Designer, it gives you a 25% bonus to deck size. So instead of making carriers that are like 40 and 60, you're making small carriers that have 50 deck, and you have 60 deck carriers that are actually performing as 75s.
Yeah.
So you get a lot more deck space, and you don't have to deal with the production cost, because the production on a license is reduced.
Okay.
So sometimes it can be useful as like a country that produces something early, like they rush the technology and then somebody else buys the license and starts producing that at a restricted speed. But while they're producing it at a restricted speed, they're also researching it themselves. Once they have their own version, they replace that with their new version, and then they stop purchasing the license. But it can be used very effectively in a multiplayer setting, because you can essentially license what you don't have and then get it, and then you can do it at a better efficiency.
Yeah.
As an example, again, Japan, I've licensed Tiger tanks from Germany.
Yeah.
I produced them, and when America landed in Yokohama, they didn't realize there were heavy tanks there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can actually get some in some weird and wacky situations, but look, it's gonna be a long time before I get there. Firstly, you know, I've got to get more familiar with the base game, but once I do, you know, not so bad for me to actually get into the into more of the DLCs and more of the features there. It's gonna be a long time before I get there.
You got to get comfortable with it. It's not a game where comfort comes easy. Like you gotta again, you gotta keep practicing builds. You gotta keep practicing the art of war. Take save games at sometimes and just keep on like throwing yourself at them. Japan is kind of hard to build up long term, but you can build up a short term Japan and just practice like fighting China and doing naval invasions and whatnot, and you can get your naval invasion skill with Japan. You can definitely like you can load up 1939 and just fight Poland and fight Poland and fight Poland and then fight like France. Do your own custom build where this is the build I want, and then save the game.
Yeah.
Invade Poland, invade France, reload, invade Poland, invade France, and just find out like what works in terms of what steps. And again, test. You're gonna get better.
Yep. All right. I think we're gonna leave it there. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Big thanks to Izlude for teaching me how to play in the last 3 hours, 3.5. Hope you all enjoyed. As for the follows, thanks to Delirious, No Machines, Jimmy Saya, Just Boy, and the Cat Pirate for the follow. Also, thanks for the raid as well. Yeah, it's didn't get a chance to reply to you in chat. I was just too busy listening to an amazing lesson, I guess, or lecture, so to speak, that Izlude's been giving. Yeah, if you're up for like Hoi or Ko2 on stream, just let me know. Izlude. Alright, otherwise I think we're gonna host someone. Alright, I'm gonna give Pearl Lover Sia a host. Hope you give him a bit of love. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed. And enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll catch you around. Bye for now. Pearl Lover Sia. That's what it is.
I just saw your stream in there.